Okay.
I didn't even realize
There's no
like
real
7 minutes
fanfare.
early.
You just go live.
Yeah. No. Normally we like. Well, I think we do like this is like our. I guess this is our waking up point, and then it's like, hey guys.
This is my excuse to just silently tweet stuff out, set up stuff. Be like, oh, in the name of pre-show.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, it's like the overture. You want to let everyone settle into their seats. So
yeah, just take a seat, watch us silently type away. A day in the life of making a podcast.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'm really excited though. This is a cool topic. It might not be like a good early morning topic for us, but I think it's like a cool topic in general.
Yeah. I'll be surprised if we get a lot of viewers because it is early, for people. But hey, I just wanted the excuse to just be able to have my coffee live. So,
which I do every time, even though it's like crappy Dunkin' Donuts coffee. So it should not be. So I should not be just like advertising that per se.
Well, coffee. Well, I don't want to say coffee is coffee, but when you need it, coffee is coffee. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's do that. Nice retweet.
I like the background setup you have going on, Jaden, with the Pikachu and then Pikachu. I think that's Goku. It looks like it's very aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I almost died, but yeah. Thank you. That's kind of this is all I have in my room. So
that's pretty cool.
Basically everything in the kitchen sink.
That's cool. I have my swag is like not organized well, but I realized my fiance did he sat here for doing like a live interview, so he just has like I don't even think anyone noticed. He just has all these like manga behind him, and I have let's see, like the Berserk volumes. He's just sitting here, and and he got the job, so I guess like Vinland Saga carried him through to help him out. So now I guess I can say that as like Vinland Saga helping him get a job, even though I don't think anyone on the call knew what any of these are. But
right, yeah. Well, no, yeah, it works fine.
Yeah, so definitely need to up
and
my.
Onimaru is actually in an anime, so that's incredible.
He's literally in another world.
Exactly. Just a heads up for the viewers or in the chat. Jaden has a little bit of a delay on his end, so if you notice any awkward kind of delay in responding, it's just we're doing our best.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good excuse for me. Yeah, if it's awkward, it's just a delay. It's not me.
He has no delay. He's just taking a while to think about it, but now I've given him clearance to just
yeah.
Are you in Tokyo, Japan, or like?
Yes, I am. I'm actually in the process of moving, but at the moment I am in Tokyo. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I wasn't sorry if that was not public information or if
it's fine.
Okay.
It's something that I think I initially tried to keep it relatively under wraps, but it just happens because it's where I live. So.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, well, because I think Joe mentioned that you're in Japan. I just wasn't sure if it was where in Japan, but also, yeah, sorry if it's too specific. You can drop your address now since we're halfway there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'll put my PO box, my social security number, my insurance card number. Yeah. No, that's totally fine.
I literally just watched a video on YouTube about $200 apartments in Tokyo and what those look like, and it was no bueno, not good.
Is it like New York bad or like different bad?
It was bad. It was really bad. It was like this shouldn't be livable bad.
Oh really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But the further away you got from Tokyo, the more better conditions you'd get for a $400 apartment.
Yeah. Well, from my experience, this is anecdotal, but from my experience, especially Tokyoites, they care more about location than the actual apartment itself. Because for a lot of people in Tokyo, their apartment is just their place to sleep.
Yeah.
It's like the important thing is to be near a train station, near a mall, near their work. The location is far more important than the actual size.
It's funny you say that, because at first when I heard that, I thought you meant like more like a status thing. Like they want to say they live in Tokyo, or like they want to be able to, have that kind of like bragging right. But when you put it like that way, I'm like, oh no, it's like so utilitarian. Like,
yeah, well, now that you say that, that's probably because that's the kind of thing the Japanese would definitely keep to themselves. But there's probably definitely an element of that too. Like, I live in the middle of Ginza, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, though.
In the viewers in the chat, just let us know, how's our volume? Are we good? Do we do you hear any echoes? Just let us know before we start. Yeah, we're not too worried about our video though, just the audio.
Don't tell us how we look, just tell us how we sound.
We know how we look, thank you.
Yeah. For you guys, it's early morning. Well, for me, I finished work only a couple hours ago, so I'm probably very haggard.
No, I think you look more awake than we do, but hopefully it wasn't too exhausting of a day.
No, it's fine. Yeah, well, audio is far more important, I think. I think people are far more willing to ignore poor video quality than they are to ignore bad audio quality. So.
Yeah, I know I am. If something's in like 480p by like accident because my internet is so bad and it just like automatically downscales, I will like kind of notice. But if something sounds bad, I'm like, burn the witch. It's awful. Like, destroy that.
Yeah. I can put up with the most potato cam video, but if like I hate when you watch a video and like the audio is just panned to one side.
Yeah. I was looking up a certain clip on YouTube that I don't think would be easy to find due to it being a Disney clip, and they uploaded it and you could only hear it in like one ear. So like all the comments were like, my left ear loved this video, so awesome.
Yeah, I know the type.
All right, it's 10 o'clock. Let's give it another minute or two. Let people keep strolling in, take their seats before we start. And also let us know again if you notice any technical issues. Jaden, are you okay with my background here for the stream? Is that representative of the conversation? Do I need something better?
You got it.
Oh no, it's totally fine. Yeah.
I think you definitely have to be fucking with him on that, because we're talking as of like how it's like, okay, it's like a single shot, great animation. Please tell me that was intentional.
I meant the
Onimaru is moving, so that's animation.
That's right.
Animation.
So I didn't mean my green screen background. Sorry, I meant the background behind like the three.
I thought you meant your background. I thought you were making a joke. This is so bad.
Okay.
I'm not that high IQ. Sorry.
Right, you mean the storyboard? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were like, I hope that my background is good animation. I'm like, no, that was like the first point.
No. My background, all I was going for, hey, it's the morning. I shouldn't have a night background. Let me just put something for the morning.
Right. No, the storyboards are fine, and completely coincidentally, I'm wearing an Ava shirt too. So.
Yeah. And I'm wearing a Yu Hakusho shirt, so I'm like not representing.
That's fine. That's animation, so that's fine.
All right. I think we're gonna get things started right about now.
Okay.
Let's see. All right.
Yeah, Maz said in chat that your background should be the elevator scene to elevate the conversation.
That's really good. I just couldn't find storyboards for that scene. I probably should have. I could have just gotten away with just the scene by itself. You could have made your background the elevator scene. Like your green screen background. Like just you, Ray, and Oscar chilling in an elevator for like a long podcast. Now so mad that that's not my background. I'll do that next time.
You got a shot.
Power.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's begin.
Okay.
Welcome to the Just Weaves podcast, the podcast where we really just talk shit, but we make it sound valuable. I'm your host or amateur shit talker, Onimaru, and I'm joined by my co-host, who is the real professional shit talker. Shocking.
Thank you. Good morning. I haven't gotten paid yet, so it doesn't count as being professional, but I appreciate it.
And we're here for a special morning show edition of the podcast. Not that it matters for audio listeners, because it's the same difference whenever you listen to it. And for the stream, we've invited a special guest, TheCynicClinic. And with that name, it's safe to assume that he is cynical, but we don't want to make assumptions. We want to get to know him first. So honestly, thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you. And just to expand on your point, actually, I'm not cynical. The TheCynicClinic is a clinic to cure cynicism.
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh, that's what I say now. But when I made the username back when I was like 17, it definitely was because I thought being cynical was cool.
I feel like that's like a pretty good username to have as a 17-year-old. I don't think any of mine were as like thoughtful or graceful or something I could mention now at all. So I think that's a good name.
Yeah, none of those lived on as my usernames. There are some people though that commit and have had their username since they were 12 years old and it still works.
Yeah, that's because they like picked a good one then. No, like we do not need to bring up our AIM usernames because something should stay dead.
Actually, funnily enough, not to derail here,
Xbox
but
gamer tag with a million X's.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, the anime YouTuber ProZD, his username is from like when he was like 12, and he just said he stuck with it because he commits. But get things going here. I brought Jaden on. That's his real name, Jaden. TheCynicClinic. I brought him on to have this discussion about animation and kind of how we talk about it. And the reason I was, I wanted to is because I watched one of his videos that came out, I think, back in January, February. That was called "People Don't Know How to Talk About Animation," and that was a great video. I don't know if I told you that, but I liked how you did it, and I think you addressed a lot of points. You're very concise, and you gave a lot of examples based in like actual like terminology and knowledge. So I think that was really good. And then I watched another one of your recent videos. I think it was about the 4-act structure, the Japanese like 4-act structure, and I thought that was also really good.
Oh, Kiso Tenketsu, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I need to talk to this guy. So that was the impetus for this. But before we get into
I'm
that,
very flattered, yeah.
Before we get into that, we want to know a little bit more about you. What are do you have like a top 10 anime, like a 3x3? What are your favorite anime, and can you describe them in, briefly?
Sure. I don't mind at all. But so if anyone is interested to plug my own thing, I have a video called I can't actually remember the title, but it's like reviewing 25 of my favorite anime, and it's something like that. Yeah.
Reviewing my top 30 anime in one sentence, I think.
Something like that, yeah. But I forget what that is. So I'm going to open my 3x3 and then I'll tell you exactly.
Oh, you do have one. Oh, cool. Okay, cool. So
I do have one, yes.
that's cool.
Where is it? I think is it this one? Okay, here it is. So, okay, yeah, sure. So I have a 3x3. Do you want me to go in? I guess I'll start in the middle with what is definitely my favorite anime is Kino's Journey.
Nice.
The original 2003 Kino no Tabi. It's one of those ones that's really hard to describe, but I guess it's because, and it's pretty relevant to what we'll talk about today. I'll not get into that, but it's the kind of show where it's like the actual animation isn't that great, but every single other facet is fantastic. And it's like a perfect example of how the limitations of the time can be utilized to make something incredible. So, and I just really love she's traveling, and each one is a self-contained story. And if anyone who has seen my channel probably knows that I love Azumanga Daioh. I've made a lot of videos about Azumanga Daioh. It's kind of like the OG Nichijouke, the like original, like for lack of a better term, like slice of life high school anime, but it's just very, very chill, very relaxing, very funny, and again, another great use of limited animation. Then I would say I really like Shoujo Shimatsu Ryoko, Girls Last Tour. That's probably the most recent thing on my list. I think it was just something about the idea of a iyashike, or like a healing type show, like a comfy show set in the apocalypse where there's only 2 people left alive, is kind of an interesting contrast. And I really enjoyed that. And I'm looking at my 3x3. Almost all of them have snow in it, which may be a recurring theme. So I know this might be a weird question, but are films okay? Like anime films?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, because some people don't include those. Okay. Next would be Tokyo Godfathers.
Let's go.
Great film.
Love it.
Because yeah. Every Christmas, that's my new Christmas movie.
Actually, what's
because well, for many reasons, it's just really comfy. I'll go ahead.
Oh, so actually, and for the viewers that just got in, we do have a little bit of a delay, so we're working with that. But just funny story about Tokyo Godfathers. Like that's the only anime I've ever gotten my oldest sister to watch. Like it was a few years back, and I was like, what would be good to show her? And I was like, I picked like, just an anime film, self-contained, and then I bought her the DVD, and then I just saw her recently. She just mentioned it because I was showing her, like, she was over and I was showing her, we were watching To Your Eternity episode 2, and I was explaining it to her and like, oh, let's watch this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't watched that anime since you showed me that Tokyo Godfathers. That was like a really good movie. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, well, it's a very accessible film, I think. Yeah. So yeah, I've shown it to a few people as well who don't usually watch anime, but yeah. I think so. It's very comfortable, and it's probably the most straightforward of Kon's works. But I really love the idea of like normally like using coincidences as the main story, because normally people say like you shouldn't use coincidences in film. It's not a good idea. People think it's like contrived and trite, but it's a film that just is entirely based on coincidences. So it's one of those movies where it's like you can do anything in movies as long as you do it well.
Yeah. And it works really well for Christmas. It's a really unique Christmas film because like many people have like, if it's Christmas time and everyone's kind of used to the same Christmas movies playing over and over again. And then, you have this like somewhat dark comedy Christmas film that's still pretty uplifting. It kind of like, it's a really cool pick to show people who are tired of the same Christmas movies. Yeah.
And it's important to note also how it's, because it is from a Japanese director and from a country where Christmas, they celebrate Christmas, but it's more something along the lines of, say, Valentine's Day in Western countries, where it's more about the aesthetics. And so sometimes it takes another culture looking at your culture to get new ideas. I don't know, I'm talking about my ass there, but
no, it's so true.
He's great. Next is Mushishi. Both seasons. I think I like Zokusho more, but both seasons are great. Kind of similar to Kino's Journey in the way of just one central character going through different worlds. Mushishi, you mentioned before how I made a video on Kisho Tenketsu. I didn't talk about it much in the video about the 4-act structure, but Mushishi is a perfect example because every single episode of Mushishi has the 4-act structure in it.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. So really, just it's beautiful. It's the most aesthetic show ever. It's great.
It's one of the few anime that I've always heard about, but still have not checked out to this day.
I definitely understand. That's me with Legend of Galactic Heroes. I just
I haven't gone on that train either.
Me with both. I'm excited for both of them.
Well, sometimes that I don't want to say hype. That's the wrong word, but
praise or
it's going. Yeah, because it'll be good, but you just think, is it going to be that good?
Yeah,
and it's hard to shake that. Next, I'd say Nausicaä.
Yay!
One's a really good film. Yay! I'm glad.
I love Natsuko. Yay!
Yeah, I have the storyboard here actually.
Ooh, that's
that's
awesome.
Yeah. I bought it expecting to be like, I bought it expecting to like,
That's awesome.
crawl through it and go page by page, but I've barely looked at it because it's ultimately a storyboard. But yeah,
I mean,
it's.
To be fair, I still have my Evangelion, I think, rebuild storyboard books, and I have not gone through them like I thought I would. So
yeah, I have a Wolf Children one. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just nice to have it. You know, it you don't know where it is. That's just one go back.
We'll find that. We'll find it eventually.
Yeah, I love that movie. I don't know where the book is though.
So yeah, so Nazca, one is obviously it's really fun, it's really good, but it's just because it's also really important. Like for anime as a whole, it's incredibly important.
Yeah. I haven't watched that one still yet. I haven't watched a lot of Ghibli films, but I know a lot about that, or the importance when I was doing a lot of research into Hideaki Anno and kind of his career and stuff like that. And that was brought up a lot. So
he drew the Big Boom.
Yeah.
The Big Boom?
Yeah, I'm just referring to, because it didn't like Hideaki Anno draw the like key frames for like one of the big explosions that's like, or did he draw something else?
Towards the end, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the main animator on the Giant Warrior. Yeah. So I guess it blows up a lot of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. In my head, I'm like, oh yeah, the Big Boom, he did that. And you see that everywhere. Right. So I was like, that's his. He did that.
Yeah. So for its historical importance too. And then I would say Kaiba.
Ooh.
The Yuasa. Oh, my light just turned off. 1 moment. I think. Is it not plugged in? 1 second. While I try to fix this.
No problem.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, Kaiba. It's interesting because I think I've only seen that show once. But it just left such a strong impression. Part of my reason is one, it's very unique. You know, it breaks from a lot of, it looks like a piece of children's media, but it's very, very serious. And but it's the best impulse buy I've ever bought because I saw it in like a bargain bin for like $5 and just thought, all right, I've never seen anime this cheap. I'll buy it and that'd be great. And then I would say the 1995 Ghost in the Shell by Oshii. I didn't really have much to say on it because it's people pretty much know why Ghost in the Shell is great. And then to top it off, I would probably say the original. My friend just messaged me because she's watching the stream. I'm gonna dox her now, but she said if you don't say Bleach, yeah, but I'm not gonna say Bleach. I'm gonna say the Hosoda Mamoru Digimon Adventure pilot.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. That's really specific. I don't know if I saw that one, but
it's very specific. Yeah. I have the Blu-ray somewhere. But yeah, it's the only part of the franchise anyone can enjoy because there's no prerequisites. It's basically like a pilot short film, and it's really well constructed. And for something that was essentially created just to sell digital pets, it's really, really good. I can't really explain much else, but yeah. That's my 3x3.
Nice. That's so cool.
That's 9 to say top 10. I'll say Bleach to appease my friend. So
that's awesome.
I feel like the common thread I'm seeing among those is a mix of chill, mainly chill, philosophical, and importance or historical relevance to the animation as a medium. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
that's pretty. Yeah, I guess that's pretty accurate. Yeah,
you get like
another.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, not through all of them, but through a lot of them. Also, a lot of the character designs tend to be fairly simplistic. I like really simple character designs.
Yeah, I think like there's a cool mix between. You
did mention that in your animation, that first video I watched of you. People love to don't know how to talk about animation. There was a segment or a scene where you kind of went through your preference, and then you went like super flat, very expressionistic, etc.
Yeah.
Overly specific. Yeah.
Actually, did you, just out of curiosity, because you touched on it in that video, but you didn't like talk about it too much, for the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, did you enjoy the approach they went with the animation being more expressive?
Broly was interesting because I ultimately do like the approach to it because they toned down the shading on Broly a lot. The director's name is completely escaping me, which I'm ashamed because I really love his stuff, but he doesn't use shading as much as some of the other prominent Dragon Ball animators, and I think that works really well because it lends itself to having more frames. The reason why Kagenashi or like no shading is tends to be those those Sakuga moments, the ones everyone praises on Twitter. It's just because it's quicker. It's quicker to do many individual frames. So I thought that was a smart approach, especially considering what Dragon Ball is. I did start to get fatigued towards the end of the battle. But I think it was fairly well balanced. It had a lot of scenes of it wasn't just always someone moving. It was pretty Gustavo, thank you. Nagamine. Okay, thank you. Yeah. It was pretty balanced. Like, they would have moments where like it would just be stop for a moment for a character to smirk and you could breathe a little bit. Yeah. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think those moments are really important. Yeah.
Yeah, what I liked about that approach, at least to me, is it was just, and I did really enjoy Dragon Ball Z and all the action, but I kind of enjoyed the callback to Dragon Ball, like, because that was just it felt more fun, more playful, more expressive, and that was refreshing, to see. I do agree towards the end. I think there was like a lot of 3D and a lot of just stuff going on, and that's where I felt fatigue watching it. But at least the beginning parts with the different outfits and the expressiveness and the fluid. I just used fluid action.
It's a good word. It's just overused. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good actually transition point to really start talking about what do you consider, what is the wrong way to talk about animation?
That's very, very difficult to answer succinctly. I suppose the wrong way, okay, this might be a semantics game, but in my opinion, the wrong way to talk about animation is to say there is a right way to talk about animation, and only one right way to talk about animation. Saying this is what's good animation, this is it, this is the only way it can be. If it doesn't have this is bad. Yeah, I that's the wrong approach, and like the adherence to like everything being on model, always looking the same, never taking risks, never like stretching or having an individual creator's imprint on it. Everything is uniform and factory, and it has to look this good. It has to have this many frames. It has to always be fluid. I think that's the wrong way to go about it, because that just limits the absolute amount of creativity you can get in any individual work.
Yeah,
I agree. It's a good way of putting it. I think it's like unfortunate that people view like a certain way of like good animation, and then you always get the same examples of kind of the more sketchy, like creative looking character designs or just like animation styles. First one that comes to mind is like Ping Pong the animation, where people always are like, well, like it looks really ugly, like the animation is bad, and you're like, okay, I know you're just talking about the character designs because you haven't actually seen like the way they're drawn. And then it always leads into like a unfortunate conversation of like misunderstandings, people kind of using like words incorrectly. And it's just like a very muddled way of trying to express opinions that just like does not communicate anything.
Yeah, that's Ping Pong's a good example, because that's an example where the animation is really good if you just judge. And I think another problem, and this doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it's just a problem that comes about talking animation, is animation refers to both the format and the like method, right? Because like, especially like anime or Western cartoons or anything, they are animations. That's the name of the format. But the process of making the move is also called animation. And so I think people get those two confused and think that everything in the visual construction is animation, even though technically only, if you're being really pedantic, only making the move is the animation part. And and ping pong is something where, that's a problem with character designs and aesthetics rather than actual, animation itself.
One of the criticisms that usually, sometimes bothers me is when people will like freeze frame on like a certain part of an animation and it's an in-between frame. And it's just like, oh, look, this is off model. What are they doing? Why is it so ugly? But that's how in-between frames are. Like they're not the key, they're not the key frames, the main key animation. They move so quick, you're not supposed to focus on it looking off model or ugly.
That's a perfect example. And that's I 100% agree. And that was the impetus to make my original video, was just because people would criticize that, say, look how bad this animation is, and it'd be a picture.
Yeah, that's where you're like, I know you can't like exactly post the whole screen, the whole scene sometimes, but if you can't like at least try like maybe a GIF, maybe like multiple pictures, maybe like something. Don't be like screenshot bad at moving. It's like, no, it's not moving. You failed at
communicating. Exactly. Your one single task to convey your opinion, and you failed. Well, it's like, could you imagine, right? If people were criticizing film and they said, look how bad the cinematography is, and they post a frame in the middle of a rapid moving camera shot and everything's blurred due to motion blur.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be completely like just laughed out of the, I was gonna say laughed out of the town, but that makes no sense at all. But there'd be a laughing stock. But people get away with it in animation all the time.
All the time they posted.
No, sorry. Go ahead, guys.
Do you think there's a certain level of like because it's a cartoon that people just kind of feel like they don't have to really take it as seriously, or can kind of like undermine the the kind of craft that goes into it?
There is a bit of, I think there is a little bit of that. But I also think there is even people who do take it seriously, right? People who like think, oh, this is art, this is medium, and that kind of thing. I think because people know how cameras work, because everyone has a smartphone, everyone's used the webcam, everyone's used a camcorder before. People know how cameras work, and so things like lighting, exposure, motion blur, maybe they don't know them well, but they know. When they see it, they know something's wrong.
Yeah.
But people don't have that same internalized exposure to animation. And, when they hear about how animation is made, they know, well, someone has to make this. Someone has to draw it. And so an in-between frame, let's say with motion blur is just technically a flaw within the camera, right? The original process of camera that stuck because it became codified and it became normalized to people. Like, it now looks weird if you don't have motion blur, even a little bit. But because that was a flaw within the actual technology itself, people think, oh, animation, you have to create every single frame. So the reason this frame is weird is because it was a mistake and they weren't scared, rather than its fundamental necessity.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think making the comparison to film is such a great way to put things in perspective. Like, whether people are receptive to it or not, it's because film is so intertwined, the techniques and a lot of the things it's so intertwined with animation that it's nice that you can compare both and give that perspective. The one thing I was going to bring up was in regards to things like people not having that sensibility with animation to kind of realize when something's wrong. I think you brought this up in your video, they only recognize when something looks off when it gets closer to realism, when it gets closer to being more of that uncanny valley, because that they know, like, oh, this looks off, this doesn't look right, but then the more stylistic it is, then it's they're not attuned to what's right or what's wrong, or because then that's more interpretation, someone's interpretation of the world, and it's more subjective, I guess.
That's a great point, because for example, I think people are more lenient even with people who will pause on in-betweens and show it off. People are far more lenient on, say, comedy anime, right? Because they think, oh, it's exaggeration, it's zany, they're supposed to exaggerate the powers, they're supposed to exaggerate their, I don't know why I said powers, the scene, the poses, the facial expressions, everything.
Yeah.
But especially if it's like an action or something that's more action oriented or more serious or more drama, they are far less lenient, because they think, no, this should be serious, so it should always look completely on point.
Yeah.
I actually have a theory about that because I was going to ask, how do you think this mindset came about? But I think now my 2 cents on it is that I think the people that were outside of Japanese culture from the Western, hemisphere, people that got into overseas fans got into anime were drawn to it because it was totally different from the cartoons they were, growing up, which was the wacky kind of hyper exaggerated poses that were meant for kids, like the Bugs Bunny, the Daffy Duck, and the Looney Tunes, all of that. And then anime, bridge that gap of I can have a serious, more deeper or whatever show that deals with heavy subject matter or even whatever subject matter and has the animation to back it up. And so they already came in with that mindset. This is what anime is to me. That's why I'm drawn to it. So when it kind of resembles more of that, what they thought was, okay, this is anime, this is a cartoon. When it resembles more of the cartoon, that's when it's a problem or not living up to that expectation.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. I mostly agree. I just want to say one thing, and this is pedantically, is that the original Warner's cartoons were not meant for kids. They were meant for adults. They were played in adult theaters. They were played before adult short films. It was actually only after World War II when they started to be syndicated on TV that, one, it wasn't financially viable to produce them anymore because most of the studios didn't have the funds, and also it was just cheaper to show them on TV. That's when it became associated with.
Okay.
But your point is still valid in that the sense of they are very exaggerated. They're very silly and slapstick. And well, there's a reason the majority of them use animals is because people are more willing to. I think that's true because people are more willing to forgive if an animal does something wacky because an animal is not a human.
Yeah. And actually, yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think another thing is, no, I think that's it because, and again, this is general, but even around the time of Tezuka and around about the time that the anime that were being imported into America, so the ones in the 70s that I think the first group to bring anime into America in particular was a group called the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. Okay. I think there was some Fred Patton. I think that's how his name was pronounced, but he was instrumental in bringing. It was like fan conventions and group, and they brought over the bootlegs and everything. And around that time, they were bootlegging like the mecha shows of the time, or shows like Lupin, and the majority of those feature human characters versus what the majority of Western animation canon was, which was funny animals. And even if they did have, so even something like say Yogi Bear or the Flintstones, right? They had a huge variety and huge cast of non-humanoid characters, right? And because, they were far more exaggerated, like Fred Flintstone doesn't look like what an actual human being looks like. He's an icon of a human being. Yeah. But a character like Lupin he's still an icon of a human being, but it's closer. So I think, there is some weight to that. People hold it to more standards of what people should do, simply because they are closer to what real humans look like.
Just an interesting observation. It's a little unrelated, but I have noticed there are more animals now in anime that it's just it's becoming like a trend. BNA this season, Odd Taxi,
Agretzko.
So I'm like, I wonder why that's becoming a thing. Not that I have anything against it. I was just curious. Just noticed it.
There's also what was it? Africa no Saturday or something
Africa no Salesman or whatever.
Yeah, Africa no Salesman. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is an interesting trend. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and same with Beastars to a different degree. It's not that same type of situational comedy and like workplace comedy, but they use it. It's a way to explore certain societal issues. But that one's kind of a weird in between of sometimes it gets a bit too human for people per se, talking about all the the furry stuff for people where they're oh, they look too real, why are they doing this? And it makes sense in context of the show, but I think that kind of makes people uncomfortable because it gets a bit too they're acting a bit too human for people sometimes.
Yeah. Well, shows like because with shows like Beastars too, like, and even Africa No Salesman, they're animals, but they have the at least they're bipedal and they have the anatomy of a human with like paws and fur. So I think there is an element of that. I just thought of something now too, because I was just going through my brain. I was like, well, of course there was Disney at the time when I said that Western animation canon at the time was usually animals, or if they were humans, they were more simplified, like the Flintstones. The exception is, of course, Disney, because Disney had more anatomical characters. But that still kind of works, because what was Disney doing? Well, Disney was doing full animation completely on ones. And so there might have still been that association of, well, okay, it's either on TV and it's really simple, funny animals, or it's Disney and they just never stop moving.
Yeah, and from what I remember with Disney films, even like the older ones, like I was thinking of something like Robin Hood, where they're all animals but like act like humans, and that one has a lot of like, for Disney standards, kind of like exaggerated humor. I'm thinking of like, something falls on the head and you see the birds going around, like that kind of stuff. Like, but then you think of even like Snow White. None of them really have exaggerated. I don't even know if they had the capabilities, but there wasn't that much that was exaggerated, because most of them, I think they were all like human characters. So like, I think, so even in Disney, I think they show that like a lot of times they use the animals for those like exaggerated scenes, like in between the human interaction. So like even they kind of made that differentiator between like the humans can't look too exaggerated, but like animals and animal like humans can.
Well, with Cinderella, there was the Seven Dwarfs. So I guess
that's Snow White.
Sorry,
Snow White.
Wow, I said Cinderella. I meant Snow White. Snow White, but it just didn't come out. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then I think at the time they still have a Mickey, a steamboat Mickey.
Yeah. Well, Snow White is interesting because several parts of Snow White were actually rotoscoped or close to rotoscope.
Oh, interesting.
Not all of it, just certain scenes were, but they used a lot of live action reference footage. They shot a bunch of footage just on the Disney backlot, and then the animators had to meticulously almost to the point. I say rotoscoping, it wasn't exactly rotoscoping, but it was like they were told to mimic it as close as they could. So when there's that expectation too,
Yeah.
And then I guess on the subject of rotoscoping or full animation, what are your thoughts on just full animation in general, and also the mindset of, which we've already touched on a little bit, which is people believe that full animation makes things more believable, or even, it's treated as the more revered form of animation.
Yeah. Again, that's a very dicey thing to get into. I don't know if it's just because I'm interested in limited animation, but I actually, it's not that I don't appreciate full animation. It's just there are actually fewer times where I'm like, oh wow, at full animation. Ironically, I suppose it's a similar thing to again, to compare it with live action. It's like if you watch a huge multi-million-dollar movie with CG, you're not really that impressed with the CG these days. You just go, okay, yeah, it's kind of expected to be there. But if you watch something that's a lot more low profile and they have some really good effects in it, you go, oh wow, that's impressive. So I guess it's kind of similar to that. If I watch a Disney movie, I kind of, I'm not really expecting to see that kind of thing. With full animation, well, first of all, it's really tough because where do you draw the line at full animation? Because a lot of limited animation techniques bleed over into full animation. So, for example, if you want to be as strict as possible, animating on twos could be seen as limited animation. Because it's essentially just repeating the same drawing twice. You're essentially saving yourself half of the work. And, and even things like, okay, if you have a shot where a character is just standing, is just sitting, right? And they're not moving that much, or they have a moment to pause or breathe or something, you don't want to redraw every single frame for that. Well, not always, because there can be times when you would want to, especially if you want a kind of boiling line sort of style. But yeah, I think it's hard to actually even define, because every piece of full animation in the world, not necessarily every shot, but every fully animated film in the world has at least some degree of limited animation in it. And so I think, yeah, it's tough. And another thing is that where it comes from, and by what I mean where it comes from is who produced it, because ultimately it's hard for me to respect full animation, because full animation is something that's only possible with a mega conglomerate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like something in a timely release in the normal, because of course there can be passion projects of someone who spends years perfecting something and doing it by themselves or with a small team, and that can look great. But yeah, those usually take decades to create. But to release things in a timely manner in a normal production cycle, in a normal slate, it requires a mega conglomerate corporation with hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. And so that means that the types of stories that are able to be fully animated are very limited, because they have to conform to the standards of whatever who has the money falls to.
It's interesting how like they're both limited in one way or another. You know, you have more money, more manpower. You can do more full animation with more people, but you're less experimental, because the bigger it is, the bigger the production is, the less experimental you can be, because they want it to succeed. It follows a formula. So you're limited in that way. And then if you're one person or a group of small people trying to produce a story you're really passionate about, you're limited by the time and what you can produce. So you have to cut corners to be able to tell the story in a way that will convey it with, you know, in the least but most effective way possible. So that's how you get like limited animation.
Yeah, I think that's essentially it. Yeah, time is money, you know.
Can you think of any examples of like something that has like full animation that's like obviously very like meticulously crafted, but you feel like it doesn't necessarily convey the same artistic emotion that you'd say something like you used for an example like Kino's Journey, where you said that, you know, everything else kind of contributes to the overall appeal, but it doesn't like technically have that much like impressive animation.
So just to clarify, something that is fully animated but doesn't quite convey the emotion.
Yeah, where like it's really like technically impressive for like animation, but that doesn't really get the job done, so to speak.
Well, the most prominent example is probably The Thief and the Cobbler by Richard Williams, the unfinished film, because you look at it and you go, this is incredible, but it was never finished, you know? And
took the
even watching... Yeah. So it's really hard to say. Like, if it's never finished, it can never convey the feelings, you know?
Yeah.
But even watching like the recobbled cut and that, the story itself is, I don't want to say cliche or boring or anything like that, but and it's really hard to quantify this, but I look at it and I just think, was it worth it? You know? Yeah.
Because it's like, what are they trying to convey with so much care and effort? But like, you know, they're making this so well crafted, but like, what is it? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
Actually, just to give a film example to kind of illustrate this question a little more. Like, I always like Marvel, for example, always gets a lot of flack for their OST or their music for their films kind of just seeming the same, and they're not memorable. They just kind of get the job done. Which is, you know, that's what happens with kind of mega corporations and stuff kind of just being pumped out. But is there an example of that for you with animation where you've seen something that's fully animated and on paper, it should be, you know, because they have those resources to do that, it should be emotionally resonant, it should be amazing, it should be mind-blowing, but you're just like, okay, this is all right. And you've watched something with much more limited animation, like how you mentioned that video with Kino's Journey, that you thought this did it a lot better with a lot less. Like I got this feeling, this was conveyed better with, you know, just a few things.
Yeah. A lot of Disney is like that for me, and not all of Disney, but a lot of Disney is like that. In particular with the character designs, because, and this is actually to a lesser extent, actually Ghibli as well.
Yo, get them. This is the hot take time. Let's go. Let's go. We're dragging everyone.
Just to clarify, I like most Ghibli films, but the way Ghibli's character designs are designed to be fully animated. You know, that's just the nature of it. Some of Ghibli's character designs, and I know Anime gets flack for this a lot, but I think it's unwarranted in most cases where people say, "Oh, the characters look the same." I don't think that. I think there's little tells, and you know, and like those kind of things.
But they do kind of look the same. They do kind of look
in Ghibli. I think a lot of the time it's like that's Nazca, you know.
I mean, they have the same kind of like. I love like love all not all Ghibli, but I love a lot of Ghibli too. No disrespect, but like I feel like they kind of recycle the same like old witch type. I feel like I've seen that in at least a couple Ghibli films. Like same nose, same like boil on the nose, same like hairstyle. Like we've kind of been here before.
Yeah. So there's things like that, and I think, especially for comedy, I really, really appreciate limited animation. There are so many times where I think like, Ghibli movies are a good example because there are comedy in Ghibli movies, but they don't tend to make me laugh as much as say something like a Yonkama or something like that. And I think especially if you come to like a reaction shot, Miyazaki is famous for doing that thing where characters will react to something and their hair just starts like, standing up on end, and it kind of works for the most of the time. But most of the time for me, I get a better feeling if like the person's just frozen in shock. Yeah. In particular, something gets me every single time is a character reacts to something and they just have no color. Like what they saw just completely drained them, Again, it's case by case because I'm not saying that you can't do that. It's just one of those things where, I think considering a mix would be better for that kind of situation. Yeah. Because to give an example, when you think about the best memes, they're usually not the ones that are really well photoshopped. It's usually someone slapped it in paint, and that just looks far funnier,
I agree. We'll
I
never
think there's
put
an
too much
element
effort
of
into a
comedy
meme.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think the best thumbnails are kind of shitty. Like there's an element of shittiness, because I've spent a lot of time and I'm not trying to go away from it, but from the topic, but like with a YouTube thumbnail, crafting it, making it aesthetically pleasing, making it really clean, but that doesn't matter. It's all about what it conveys, and it doesn't need to be,
how shitty are you talking about? Are you talking about like one half is there and then it's zoomed in on the obvious element and there's still a big red circle and the text says "what the fuck" in red text how shitty are we talking?
like that. As long as it gets that, oh hey, what is that? That curiosity, or whatever feeling you're trying to provoke.
I guess there is an element of that because I'd probably still click on that thumbnail.
Yeah. I think that's so true. Speaking of the Disney point, do you feel like that's for like all kind of Disney, or do you have kind of like a mental differentiator between like, let's say old fashioned Disney with like the 2D designs versus like the more CGI 3D era, or kind of both?
I think it's still present in the 3D Disney.
Okay.
I think it's still present. Funnily enough though, sometimes 3D Disney is actually a little bit better at it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think because it's 3D and the fact that there's 3 dimensions, maybe again, it's a sense of people. So let's say, for example, you have a shot, right? Let's say Ava, right? Ava is famous for like the elevator scene, shots where characters don't move, and that's a point people bring up a lot about it, the show, or like shows like that. It's like, why aren't they moving? Do something, But a lot of the time in film, those sorts of shots can fly, because people still know it took effort to make. They don't see it as lazy, whereas people see something like the elevator scene in Ava as lazy because they only did one drawing, Versus say, in a shot like trying to think of one off the top of my head. Of course, now none are coming to mind, but there are countless shots in cinema where it's just a static shot and nothing's moving and it's really impactful. Okay, perfect example. Star Wars, Luke Skywalker looking at the twin sunset, right? He doesn't move. The camera doesn't move. Nothing barely moves, but it's a really iconic image, right? Nobody looks at that and says it's lazy. Yeah. Because it still took craft to compose the scene. But people will do the same for 2D animation. They'll say it's one drawing, lazy. They didn't feel like drawing the rest, without understanding how much time it takes. Just the majority of the times, I think, spent on animating something is make sure the background's good, setting up the pose, the storyboarding, doing the layouts, color correcting, everything like that. The first frame, and from my experience of animating, doing the first frame is by far the hardest part, getting that right, and the rest is just, it takes time, But for 3D animation, I guess because people still think, they had to craft the entire scene. They had to craft. I don't know what it is. It probably still takes a similar amount of effort, right? But people are more able to, I guess, internalize and picture, okay, it still took time to craft this table, to craft this room, to make this. I'm thinking specifically, there's a few shots in Zootopia where I forget the rabbit's name, but the rabbit is like depressed for some reason, and there's a shot of her sitting on her bed in her empty apartment and just holds on this shot, and there's no movement, right? And I don't know if that would really happen in an older, especially like the golden age Disney movies, you know, like Bambi. Everyone's always moving in Bambi. It's really annoying. Like,
except the mom. She stopped moving real quick.
Yeah. Good point. But then, yeah. But like, you know, when the mom dies, it's like, sorry for anyone who hasn't seen Bambi. We're spoiled.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, no one ever expected us to be spoiling Western animation here.
No one expected to be spoiled on Bambi in our present year, 2021. But sometimes you got to do it to him.
But in regards to, I think it really, in terms of subconsciously or unconsciously forgiving 3D animation, I think you're onto something about that. Does come down to the three dimensionality, because that is closer, even if it's an animal, it's still closer to reality or simulating realism as opposed to a flat drawing where they'll just be like, they just slapped a painting here and had it play for like a minute with some background music. And it's like, no, I was trying to create atmosphere. No, you just slapped one drawing. You know? Yeah,
the three dimensionality, because like that's exactly it. Because I think that's exactly it. Because this is all conjecture. You know, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. But
anime psychologist.
Anime psychologist. I think that's an actual channel.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
And if it's not, we can make one. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, especially most 3D movies, even if the character designs, I think an important point is most 3D movies, even if the character designs are unrealistic, they try to be realistic with the lighting, you know, because people know how light works. You know, humans can process differences in light more than they can in color, you know. And so it's something where it's like, if the lighting is the reason why early 3D kind of looks janky to most people, I think is not necessarily because of the character designs of the animation. I mean, that definitely is an element, but it's just because the lighting engines at that time weren't powerful enough to properly simulate how real light works, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think there's an element of that. And by default, well, not by default, but in cell animation, at least by default, you couldn't replicate how lighting works. You know, because everything had a sharp edge, you know, and so two-tone shading came about just because, well, people tend to need some differentiation, some difference between light and dark, and so that was just the cleanest and easiest solution. And if you think now, like, if there are some animation with 3D techniques and everything where, or like 2D digital techniques where you're able to kind of airbrush it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know about you. A lot of the time, if you've got the line art of an anime character and it's airbrushed, it just kind of looks weird to me, you know? And I don't know if that's just because the two-tone shading is kind of coded in me, or if it's just because now that I can see how that is rendered in light, the illusion of the simplified icon of the anime character starts to break apart.
Do you have an example of that? Of an example of the airbrushed, you know, like what you're saying about it looking like using that technique of it being airbrushed and it just doesn't look right?
Off the top of my head, a lot of I think Toriyama for a while had an airbrushing phase, and he would render his artwork of Dragon Ball characters in airbrushed, and it just looked a little weird, you know. There was just something I couldn't describe about it. It just looked a little weird.
So I think we've covered the quote unquote wrong way to talk about animation. And now I don't even know if this is, you know, correct, but what's the right way to talk about animation?
Well, like I said, I think there's no right way.
Yeah.
I think because
End of sentence.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Just do not talk. Do
very
not
nice
speak.
guys talking to you. Yeah.
Do not speak about it.
Well, the first thing I think is that talk about animation not as a category separate from the story itself.
Yeah.
Because when people review a show, right, they say, well, they have the story section, the character section, the theme section, the animation section. This animation is the story. The animation is telling the story. And so they're kind of inseparable. They're not inseparable, but they're not mutually exclusive, you know, because you can have a good story with bad animation and vice versa, but they're not mutually exclusive. And so I think for me, I just like people talking about animation and how it services the story. And if you do that, I don't care if you don't know the technical terms, if you use fluid in every sentence. I really don't care, because that stuff takes time to learn all that jargon, right? I think it's just, it's if you're able to, what was trying to be done here? Yeah, I think is the right way to talk about animation.
I have like a mini story to follow to a question, but I feel like this is one of those something I like thinking about in terms of animation is like a lot of times you'll hear from people who are like not into the medium, or even some people who are into the medium, like, why is it animated? You know, I mean, no, like my dad is like he's a huge nerd, but he's like an anime like hater, where he's like, you know, he will banter about it a lot. And, you know, he'll say, you know, like, I love the story premises. There's so many cool ideas, but why does it have to be drawn? And I tried to use the example of like Into the Spider-Verse, because he saw that, he loved it, like totally behind it. And I was like, Dad, could Into the Spider-Verse work in every capacity with live action? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, so that, but with like anime. He's like, no, it's not the same. I'm like, you need to transitive property this. Like, this is like, we're trying to like first grade math this over. But I was wondering, like, I'm sometimes pretty bad at like describing this well, but like, what do you think are the inherent like benefits of why something should be animated in the medium compared to just being another live action series?
That's interesting. I've definitely met those people too. Yeah. And I think I even went a phase through that in the opposite sense of like, I want to, if the characters look too realistic, I went through a phase, but now I don't. But to answer your question, I think you don't need a reason. It's just, do you want it to be animated? It can be animated, because that's how art works. You know, if you want to do it, you can do it. You know, it's better if, you know, if you have a point, great. You know, it should service the story, of course. Yeah. So you shouldn't just say animated because I like animation. It's like, okay, use that animation to tell the story, because if you choosing to make it animated will fundamentally change how the story is told.
Yeah. I think that's so true, especially even with something, I think the first one I think of is like Death Note, which is like very, you know, one of the more realistically designed, with like, you know, the proportions of people, the way everything's framed and stuff. But even when you think about a lot of the directing that goes into it, there's so much like over the top internal monologuing, the use of colors that they do for characters. I mean, I think they could kind of replicate something like that with live action, but as evident from the Netflix Death Note movie, they choose not to. So thank you. I don't know if you guys have been cursed by seeing that, but it's not good. And it's not good as like, because it's not like Death Note, it's just like bad in general. And it shows that like...
You mean the 2017 Death Note one, right?
Yeah.
I have seen that, yeah. It's pretty...
My friends took that bullet for me. I didn't they told me about it.
The worst
My one sister watched that and not the original Death Note, so I've disowned her, and she is dead to me.
Strangely enough, the Japanese live action films of Death Note were actually not that bad.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, they're pretty fun. They used the Red Hot Chili Peppers as the end credits, which is weird. It's a very strange choice, but yeah.
Kind of love that in a weird way.
Oh, the live action Death Note. My favorite part was when they were like, "What should we call ourselves?" And it's like, we should call it Kira, because for some reason, but it also kind of means killer in Japanese. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, they're like, it's like these random scene losers from Seattle being It's like this like outcast loser and this cheerleader being like, it kind of means killer in Japanese. Like, no, it doesn't. Go home.
And again, it's like Death Note mostly uses heart attacks, but then the movie uses these like Final Destination shit.
Yeah. So like the clear. Clear misunderstanding of how to do like dramatics, whereas like you watch the anime for it and it's like they're using it to heighten the emotional tension of scenes in a way that like you probably could find it, if a good director might be able to do that in live action, but it would be a bit of a leap.
I have two things on that in terms of, when to choose, like why animated over live action when you can, do one or the other. I think Spider-Verse wouldn't have worked. Into the Spider-Verse wouldn't have worked as live action because with the animation, you can showcase the different styles and use that to separate the different worlds. So for that, like, I think it's best in animation. But the other angle, I don't think it's true nowadays, but like years ago, a lot of the stuff that could be done in animation, especially with fantasy films and stuff like that, it's a lot easier, I think, to draw it or and then make it come to life in drawings as opposed to in live action because of the amount of money, the amount of budget to make that realistic and look good. Now with CGI and effects, we can kind of capture all of that. It does cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but now we're closer to that. But at least in the 80s, 90s, it was, I think it looked better in animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's even true today because, like, in terms of, not exactly, of course, but like if you got a live action film of two characters talking, and then a live action scene of two characters talking, and a live action scene of like aliens destroying the Earth, those are going to be hugely different in the amount of manpower and proportion and time, right? But if you in animation, you have those same two scenes. Again, it depends on the level of detail and time, but let's say if you allocated the same team with the same resources, it's possible they could do both scenes with the exact same amount of money, exact same amount of manpower. Yeah. Something again with Death Note's another interesting example is I think that ties into its manga roots.
Yeah.
Into its comic roots because comics can play with time in a way that live action can't.
Yeah.
I think again, because like in live action film, I think whenever people criticize a film of like whenever it's like a film and there's a countdown and everyone's always snarky and they're like, oh, that was more than 1 minute, like because they know what a minute is because they experience a minute every day, right? But like comics, depending on your reading speed, that could be a minute that they're thinking all these things, and especially something like Death Note, which plays around with the speed chess, the
the 2D chess going on in their minds. And
it works in a comic, and then it's more applicable in an anime, I think, again, because there's that level of separation. Because if you tried to do some of the like the tennis match,
the tennis match.
Oh my god, tennis match in live action because people would say just that's not how you play tennis, right? But you can get away with it in anime because holding on a character just like pause like this, as their thought processes go. Well, one, it's already just one drawing, so you can save time just by holding that drawing, right, and slowly pan for it. But two, the fact that it's freeze framed isn't such a big deal. Isn't so striking compared to live action where people would be like, well, they're not moving.
Why is he not moving?
Yeah, why is he not moving?
Yeah.
And it's funny how that works. Now that's the opposite scenario of the elevator scene in Ava. It's like, okay, that's where, this time it works and doesn't work in live action, but in live action that, so.
Yeah.
So back to the right way, the wrong way of talking about animation, or just in general, like kind of improving, like, like how people talk about, articulate what they see in anime as a medium. How can a fan gain more of an appreciation over the visual aspects of a work?
So I think, again, it's tough because there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of terms. I think at least learning the basics. So I know in my video, I kind of said it shouldn't be the judge, but a great starting point because everyone does kind of use it is the 12 principles of animation, especially if you want to understand Western media. Those are really, really vital. There's a great video by Alan Becker on YouTube. He's an animator. He's the guy who did the stick figure animated version. Yeah. He has a great comprehensive 20-minute video. You can get all those out of the way. And another thing, because in those videos, he also just very important terms. Like, for example, we've been using them, but some people don't even know in-betweens. Some people don't even know key animation, or if they've heard it, they don't know exactly what it means. So even just learning like those terms and why they are used the way they are is one way. With anime, it gets a little difficult because you've got the Western approach to animation and the Western understanding of animation theory, and then anime theory. And of course, there's a language barrier. People who don't understand Japanese, some of these terms can be translated directly, but then some have slightly different meanings, and that the principles are different. But even just learning some basic ones as well can help.
Jaden, just out of curiosity, do you speak Japanese like moderately or really well?
Conversationally.
Okay.
I feel like that means like better than he's saying. I feel like he speaks it like very well.
Well, it's okay. I'll put it this way: I can hold a conversation, but I can't watch anime without subtitles.
Okay.
Okay, that's cool. That's
He's not there yet. Not there yet.
Yeah,
Soon.
not there yet. Yes. Yeah. The end goal, sure, but yeah.
I have. Oh, sorry. I have a potentially infuriating question that might lead into a tangent. But so like you mentioned you're an animator. I didn't really know like the full like investment you like had in like animation and like your full like full like story. How annoying is it to see people talk about animation quality in terms of effort? Because you hear a lot of people say like, oh, you see the people like they're criticizing a scene or something, or they're like, they just didn't have enough effort. They just stopped caring about this. How inaccurate is that, and how infuriating is that?
It's pretty bad. So my history as an animator, I was never a full-time animator. I did it as kind of not a side gig, but in my previous job, I worked in advertising, and sometimes I would get animation jobs. So I actually get that it's not just limited to animation, that though, as I do feel that, but it's just kind of anything, because a big one on YouTube, especially in anituber, is editing. People say like this like big, they hold editing up to be this impenetrable thing. It's like, oh, I'd love to have better editing, but I just can't. I'm just not good. It's like, well, start. That's the only way it's going to happen, Yeah. And something simple something that looks simple can have a lot of effort put into it. I want to clarify, I'm not saying that I think everyone needs to be an animator to talk about animation.
Yeah.
I don't like that. You try to do better kind of mentality. But when it comes to effort, when you're saying someone else is lazy, that's quite a big claim, honestly.
Yeah.
It feels like a simple word, but it's quite a big claim.
It is, yeah.
Because it comes with the connotation of you didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how much people care.
Yeah, because you even see that with shows that are like a bit more easy to, a bit more acceptable to like dunk on, not even criticize. But I'm thinking of like the Arrow manga senseis where people are like, the content is bad and it also looks bad. And I know there was a period where people were like, they obviously just didn't care about this show.
Yeah. But sometimes people don't know the behind the scenes of the production, because you're working with multiple people. So, they might have really cared about it, but just they couldn't bring everyone together, or it was just a nightmare or something like that.
Yeah. I think the collaborative nature of both animation and film cannot be ignored. It's like people attribute it to a single person, but there's no way. I mean, there is, but it takes decades, right?
It's like a giant group project.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of the time too, it's smaller anime, right? And I've fallen victim to this. I used to dunk on Pupa for its animation, and I dunk on Pupa for a different reason. But the animation is like, this is a passion project. It was an obscure manga. They wanted to get it up. They did everything they could to get it up, and this is what they could do, right? And people also kind of got screwed because of the censorship on its television airing. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where it's like, and again, myself at that time, and this is why I understand, because it takes time and it's hard to ignore those things, because you look at it and you go, this is not good, right? Or I don't think this is good. This is choppy and weird and whatever. But to say they didn't care is a huge claim.
Yeah. If it feels a bit more, it's like a careless statement, but also feels a bit more like below the belt in terms of like you're trying to gauge their motivation and like work ethic and everything just based on the output. And like we've all been in situations where we've tried a lot and it did not turn out well. So it does seem like a bit offensive. especially someone who like barely draws stick figures. So I know I'm in no position to criticize anyone drawing. If they make it move, I mean, miracles on from coming from their hands.
Yeah, and again, it's like even all the effort in the world doesn't matter if you don't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So super high props to Mappa for Attack on Titan final season, looking as good as it did. Although no props at the same time because they did have some unhealthy crunch for that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some things, right, where it's like I will always respect decisions made for the benefit of the studio at the cost of drop in production, right?
Yeah.
One of the examples I'm thinking of is the 4th season of The Legend of Korra. Had that god awful recap episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I
bad,
remember that.
Right? It was so bad. It was so cringe. But the reason that episode exists was because they were told that they had to either cut production, they had to cut an episode, or they had to fire their staff 4 weeks early.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, and they chose to create that episode as a way to let the staff keep their jobs for an extra month.
Oh, that's awesome.
Industry, yeah, and so as much as I think that's the final product is terrible, the reason why it exists, I have to respect.
Yeah. And for what I know, I think the creators of Korra or just Avatar in general, they're really good guys. So they try to do right by their staff. So I didn't know that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely cool to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine caring about your animators. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a fan wanted to kind of improve like their visual like vocabulary, like kind of get more of a sense of being able to distinguish between different techniques being used in animation and appreciate that, what can they do? Would that just be from just watching anime more carefully, or do they have to invest time and kind of looking into more of the resources like I think you listed in your video and research? Is that what it involves?
I think that's definitely I definitely condone doing that kind of research. But it's not 100% necessity. Especially because some of it can be quite meaty, you don't know where to start, that kind of thing. One thing I think everyone should read is The Anime Machine by Thomas Lamar. Because I read that book. My good friend Joe from Pause and Select talks about it often, and I decided to read it. I think what is the most important chapter is free to read on Thomas's website, actually. So if you just Google The Anime Machine by Thomas Lamar, that's easily readable. And that talks about how the multiplanar camera, so essentially, like the glass panes and the fact that like they can slide and there's parallaxing, is the reason. That's where animation, and in particular anime and limited animation, gets its power. That's its like language. But again, that even that can be, if you don't even have a basic, can be quite a heavy step. I would say that it's important to, again, like I said, distinguish what is actually just the straight animation, and to instead kind of break up certain things in a way you would with film. So you would talk about the lighting, talk about the color, talk about the framing of the shot. The edits between, how things work, character design, backgrounds, even those kind of like more layman terms, right? That people can use. Separating those things is important because, again, looking at something like Kino's Journey, it's almost completely on threes. There's a lot of still shots. There's a lot of panning. And sometimes the actual quality of the drawing, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's a lot more rudimentary, than even the artwork for the books or the light novels. But the lighting is always so strong. The shot composition is always so strong. The way the shots are edited is always so strong. So if you look at the sum of its parts, the visual quality is really important. So I think maybe that's a good way to say that, is animation is not the only indicator of visual quality.
Yeah.
I guess I should.
Yeah, and that's so true and important. And thank you for that recommendation, because I've been to like a couple anime conventions back when we were allowed to do it. I've gone to the same kind of like anime panel where they're like, this is threes, this is twos, this is ones. And I mean, I get it, but it always goes over my head. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I think that sounds like something that's some good food for thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate the recommendation too, because I'm acquainted with a lot of Western animation principles. I've taken a few animation classes and I kind of know some stuff, but I don't know. I've never really been able to completely apply it to anime because it's like there's sometimes some differences and not all of it kind of does apply. Like the whole squash and stretch kind of principle as part of the 12 principles of animation. Like you don't always see that in anime. Like sometimes you do, but so yeah.
No, yeah, that's a great, and I want to compound on that is that I didn't study animation at university. I took 1 or 2 classes at university. I studied film at university. I studied media in general, but I didn't even do a minor or anything like that. Everything I learned was either on the job when I get these animation jobs, and I'd have to quickly Google how to Flash or just personally wanting to know more because it's a medium I love. I think there is this, again, it comes similar to what I said with the editing thing. There is this expectation of, I'm not a serious, I'm not an academic or I'm not an animator, so starting it is too difficult. It's like, or I don't know where to start, and it's like, just start. It's fine,
Yeah. I think like just touching on something else is to put it to rest. I think at this point everyone knows that the budget meme is good and dead. I want to believe that, but
I want to.
But just for the people, because I still sometimes see it and have like a mini aneurysm, like it's like a earthquake side effect of like they still say this. Can you like help us put to rest the idea that big budget equals good animation? Because I think it came back with the Attack on Titan thing because Mappa was doing Jujutsu Kaisen in the same season as Attack on Titan. So you get some like really impressive looking Jujutsu Kaisen fight scenes. And they're like, imagine if this budget went to Attack on Titan. And it's like, they're completely disregarding the fact that it's like, 2 different teams, 2 different production committees just happen to be working at the same studio. But like I'm sure you know a lot more about this than I do about how like budget does not equate quality.
Yeah. It's hard to give specific anime examples because for a couple of reasons. One, studios can be tight-lipped about how much money is actually funneled, right? And that kind of thing. And another reason is it's hard to find in English, and my level of Japanese kanji is hard, man. Like it's really hard.
Yeah. I only ever learned 30, and I don't remember any of them anymore. So
you learned 30? I haven't learned any. That's impressive. You guys are both impressive. Good job.
No, I'm not impressive. The best I could do in Japan was just ask at a Starbucks where the bathroom is, and they understood me, and then that was great. So they got to go to the bathroom.
But it's I think again it's one of those things. Anime is business. Anime is an industry. I think if people like just try to apply the budget meme to their own lives, they will see how it crumbles. Like if you think of like every shitty retail job you've ever worked, was the problem solved by throwing money at that store? No, it was solved by getting more people to work on it, getting more people on shift, giving more money to the staff so they could work longer and be happier. It wasn't just the store itself had more money.
Yeah, a lot of the processes come into play, and money could probably help that, but it's not like it's not like one-to-one.
Yeah, that whole needing more people for creative endeavors, that's hitting close to home now.
Yeah.
Because again, like you look at something like Kyoto Animation, right, before the tragedy, right? They only chose to do a couple big projects, every so they had a much lower output rate. They paid their animators a decent wage, a living wage. Almost everyone who talked about working at Kyoto Ani loved working at Kyoto Ani versus many of the others, and a lot of them. And it's interesting too because those shows get praised for their animation.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, yeah, it's not because the show itself had a higher budget. It's the workers were happier and had more time and were able to live a working wage.
Yeah. Do you think that there's still hope that more studios will kind of go towards that model, or is it kind of like I don't want to say it's like a double-edged sword, but you see like so many studios that we hear like bad scheduling, overworking their staff. You know, we saw that with like Wonder Egg this past season with like people going to the hospital and stuff. Like, you know, do you feel like they're still kind of seeing like, you know, what I'm thinking like a Demon Slayer situation? They're like, okay, this one clip blew up, so we can kind of just do whatever because we'll get success no matter how we treat our workers. Like, do you think there's any like hope for change, or are they still kind of seeing the success of the current system, so they're not really inclined to change?
I think with the pandemic, that hope is very slim. Unfortunately, and this is not a new thing. You know, this has been raged for decades. You know, I want to believe, and I want to believe, and I think what was a step in the. Again, I think it was going to one core was a kind of step in the right direction, because rather than, you know, it's just you have to do this every week. You have to push something out every week. You just have this short show. What I would wish is that they would use that as a, you know, because the problem is it's still the animators are still having to work on that show. They finish that core and they go on to the next core. Right? They go on to the next show. So it's still a problem, but I feel like that's a step in the right direction of like, okay, if you could schedule it better.
Drax brings up in the chat, the reason why we can have those fight scenes in Jujutsu Kaisen is because they're paying the in-betweeners from Korea way less even than the Japanese animators get paid. And
yeah, that's another problem. Yeah.
And when I saw when I saw like a long time ago, like what people get paid in the animation industry and the levels, you know, from lowest animators to voice actors, I was just mind boggled how that's not even a living wage.
Yeah, and that's the public information. Yeah, that's the Japanese workers. Yeah, that's a great point. But Korea and the Philippines, you shouldn't forget the Philippines, and Vietnam too. Recently, a lot they're going to Vietnam as well. That outsourcing is Japan. I'm learning has a serious subcontractor problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a bit of a tangent, but did you hear about the Abe mask last year?
No, what was that?
So Abe, at the beginning of the pandemic, the prime minister was like, here's our plan. We'll send out 2 masks to every household. It was incredibly insufficient. The masks came, they were like smaller than, you know, than anything. You know, they were the tiniest thing ever. I wore mine once, and then I used I used a dishcloth once. It was terrible. Terrible PR, but it cost a fuck ton of money.
Yeah.
Wow. There were so many subcontractors that they went through. And so it's not just the problem with the anime industry. There's a lot of like how Japanese business is conducted. And because even essentially, technically, those in-betweeners, a lot of them they're not salaried employees. They're contractors, you know? Yeah. And especially like, in between, even some key animators, you know? And Ghibli as well, and you know, Ghibli's known to be ghoulish, you know.
Yeah, I've heard that the Miyazaki or Ghibli horror stories.
Yeah, and in particular, they tend to go after young talent for the in-betweeners and the key animators, and they burn them out and then go to the next batch, right?
Wow. Yeah, and prove your strength.
Then, with all of that in mind, how do you feel about, you know, anime now more and more becoming more of the cultural export of, you know, Japan to kind of attract, you know, overseas fans? And how do you feel about that?
I think it's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's interesting. I think I read the other day that, like, in terms of overall profits and overall sales, it's now a 50-50 balance between domestic and international, the anime industry as a whole. So it is increasing. Yeah, it's pretty high. I think it's good also in a sense because it's easier for foreigners who are not, you know, those subcontractors in Korea and Philippines or whatever. It's easier for people who say live in the West or live in other countries who want to work on anime because they just love it and they want to make it. It's increasingly easier for those type of people to work. They still have to fit into the Japanese mold and don't rock the boat or everything like that. But it's easier for that to work. I hope that with enough, I don't know, it's a PR game, you know, and it's getting that information public. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you have something to say, Shaw?
No, go ahead.
So now bringing it back to, the conversations about animation and back to you, actually, what is your favorite utilization of animation? I know you've mentioned Kino's Journey. You mentioned a few.
I was going to bring that up as a question, actually. So good call.
Oh, great. Thinking alike.
My favorite utilization of animation. Do you mean in a particular like moment or overall?
Could be either like scene or then like overall.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the above.
Overall is difficult. Overall is difficult. I can think of a particular one. That's from End of Ava.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's pre-instrumentality. It's like before the as the whole Tang bit is happening, right?
Yeah.
There are shots of Shinji Shinjing out. And there's all these flashes, all these rapid flashes of previous scenes from the movie, previous scenes from the show, right?
Yeah.
And showing his degrading mental state. How they show those scenes is it's the exact same scenes, but they've flipped the cells. So the side with the painting on the back is what's shown to the camera.
Yeah.
And so everything looks warped and horrible and flooded because you can't actually see the line art clearly.
Yeah.
And so that's my favorite. Yeah.
That's dope. I didn't even know that. It's been a while since I've seen it. Did you know that, Onimaru?
So I learned that while I was preparing for my Ava video. I watched End Evangelion like 5 times and I read some commentary and then I was like freeze framing on a bunch of those scenes that are rapid fire towards the end of the movie. And I was like, oh, and when I found that out, because they wanted to, mimic like what the animators are seeing on the other side. Because they were playing a lot with reality and like animation and stuff like that there. So my mind was blown. It was awesome.
That's that's so cool.
It ties into the scene where they show the theater and the perspective is from the screen, So it's exactly what the animators are seeing, what the creators are seeing. Overall is really difficult.
Actually, you know what? Before you go into overall, what favorite Sakuga?
I was gonna ask you, like, give us the what's your favorite Sakuga moment? Because I know it's kind of like the meme thing, but you got to pick the Sakuga clip that gets shared everywhere that trends, and we're like, oh, this is cool.
The TheCynicClinic approved Sakuga moment.
TheCynicClinic approved Sakuga. Okay. That's really tough. And there's no shortage, There's no shortage.
That's what makes it tough.
Yeah. It's I don't know if I can give a specific one.
Maybe the one that when you see it, you're least bothered by seeing it for the 100th time, Because you see a lot of the same ones over and over again. So at first I was like, okay, I don't mind when this one pops up for the 10th time this week.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Someone in the comments saved me. And someone, I mean Joe. But it's from Joshiraku. There's a scene in Joshiraku. They're talking about animation itself, right? The very first scene and the first episode and the last episode, they reuse the same joke. The first episode, the joke is they're talking about how Yonkoma became an anime, and they're talking about why that's even necessary. And I forget her name, but the character most prone to having mental breakdowns starts lamenting of how, think of the poor animators and how much effort they put into this thing that would be conveyed with just one panel, and she's overly expressing herself and all this, and then they repeat the same joke at the end where it says think of the animators who won't get paid unless they get high sales on the Blu-ray version. And she's just doing this it's just so overdramatic. There's even a point she does a flip in her chair. That's pretty good because one, it's meta, so it's funny, but it's actively selling. Another one I really see is again from the Digimon Adventure pilot. Is there is a shot of the kids, Kukuru, that's the name. Thank you. There's a shot of the kids just after at the end of the movie evolved into Greymon, and Greymon starts his attack, and it's just it's impressive for two reasons. One, because it's really well animated, right?
Yeah.
It looks fucking terrifying because it's a giant dinosaur, you know, and there's like harsh lighting and shadows because it's the middle of the night. Because it's he's so big that the shadows are on the top, right? Because the lights of the street are like pointing upwards, and so it's like got that horror lighting. And then there's a shot where he just runs towards and starts the fight, and that shot is great. One, because there's actually some 3D movement, right? There's some 3D movement where the shot changes, and the other great thing about it is it's entirely from the camera is at the height of the kids, and so where like boots on the ground, what would it be like if there was a giant dinosaur just fucking shit up? So that's really good.
I'm a Greymon stan personally, so I gotta check that out.
There you go. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, Greymon stan. Okay. What?
You gonna say?
No, sorry. Yeah, never mind.
No, I just love Greymon. I don't like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
but then again, I just like dinosaurs. I think I'm also a Godzilla stan. So like, Godzilla versus King Kong. I'm rooting for Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. I think it's always so cool when you also see it in like a film, like in like a kid's film, when like they're most likely not going to notice it as much. It's cool to see that they like have such attention to detail and stuff. So
yeah. Oh, and since you did mention a meta moment like about Joshiraku and talking about animation, I just had to ask, what do you think about Shirobako?
I knew that was coming. I knew you were going to bring that up.
I just had to. Do you think it's a good representation of like how it is like working in the animation industry, or do you think it's a little like too idealistic?
I have to say I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. Actually, ironically, I have been very, very slack with watching anime, and I'm not familiar with that. I actually tend to like. I actually haven't seen people like throw my anime list out and they'll be like, I've watched 3,000 shows. In terms of volume, I haven't seen nearly as much as some of those people. Yeah.
I just thought it was one that you might have checked out because it's a PA Works.
Okay.
It's a PA Works show that came out in like 2015, 2016, and it's literally what it's like working. Like the main character is a production manager or one of the production people in an animation studio, and it's like it was her dream kind of to be working in her own anime. And then now it's like the horror story of what it's actually like working in the studio and trying to get like the animation cells and meeting the deadlines and getting everything that they, need from people as they're working on an anime that's airing weekly. And like half of the episodes aren't even done. The director doesn't even know what he's doing. It's just like pure chaos.
But it's kind of cool because it's not too like it feels. I mean, I haven't worked in a studio, so grain of salt. It feels like a nice balance of like the realism of the stress of it combined with the like the optimism and passion that goes into it. So it's not just like working on anime sucks because you like get stressed out and die and then you make a shitty anime. It's like the combination of the two, which makes it like a really worthwhile experience.
Right. Yeah. So I actually do know what this is. I'm looking now. I just simply forgot the title. I made I wanted to, there was two I was going to watch. I was choosing what to watch next once, and it was this or Dojin Work. And I chose Dojin Work because it was shorter and I could finish it more quickly. Yeah. Because the time is money, and this was also 24 episodes. So yeah. Okay. Well, it was run in, the manga was run in Dengeki Daioh, so it must be good.
Yeah, I think they made it afterwards because I think it was an original, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think
it was an original.
And then they do the manga for it. So it's good when they do the like manga afterwards because they're like, okay, yeah. I think it's a fun show. It's definitely one of the best shows of the decade, probably. I don't know. I'll say that. Nice. Why not?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It made Onimaru's top 10. So we had our 3x3 episode and we were talking about that. So
yeah. And then Gustavo in the chat says, I think Shirobako could be seen as idealistic, but gets the problems of the industry in broadly good terms. So
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, yeah, you kind of have to expect that because it's ultimately the anime industry that's making it, and it's still ultimately being broadcast. So just to get it out there, there are certain things they just have to do.
Well, that's what a mangaka told me about Bakuman once when I asked him at a panel, like, hey, is Bakuman like kind of like what it is like in the industry? And he's like, no, that's just idealistic propaganda. They just want you to come into the industry.
And that's saying something when one of the characters goes to the hospital from like health problems. So if you're saying that like when like, oh yeah, it's pretty idealistic, including all of these health issues involved and the stress of trying to get one thing serialized.
What I was told was idealistic was, oh, the editor caring about you being in the hospital. No, that's idealistic. They'll just be reminding you of your deadline. That's what actually happens.
Right. Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it's cutthroat. Yeah, there are some of those things where it's like like Japanese work culture is pretty, especially traditional Japanese work culture. It is changing, and certain industries like IT, where like there are a lot of startups, and they can have a much more flexible work culture. But yeah, overtime is expected by a lot of Japanese companies. And that's why you see like for example, I don't know if anyone saw the like there's like the McDonald's anime ad, Yeah, and like things like that. They always show that kind of thing. They always show like, oh, it's really tough, right? But in the end, it's rewarding,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always an element of that because they just, they can't undersell the fact. They can't deny that it's difficult work, but they have to, have to
keep it going.
McDonald's somehow. Yeah.
Yeah.
ZFPT in the chat elaborates, Bakuman is an elitist perspective on the manga industry. So there you go.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I love Bakuman. It's just like a work, but yeah, I think there's like probably some elements of realism, but then definitely a lot probably idealized. Like there are a lot of happy elements.
Yeah,
you should be able to separate like work from like a fiction from how it is in reality. If the work itself is good and it tells a good story, then
yeah. And then back to you, Jaden. We touched on this a little bit, but I guess you already kind of answered this, but what's your background with animation, specifically Japanese animation?
Okay. Well, I've never worked on Japanese animation, if that's what you're asking.
No, just kind of your knowledge of it, right. And you've answered some of this in bits and pieces.
Yeah. I was more of I was always more of a manga guy growing up. Because two main reasons. The first one was that Australia still does, but at the time had some of the worst internet in the world. And so getting a high quality links and streams and downloads of anime was really difficult. And the second reason was my library, local library, had a huge manga selection. And so what started as like nostalgia, like rereading things like Dragon Ball and that kind of thing, just delved into, learning, reading all the manga that was available in my library. So it started as that. And then I guess it just kind of extended because, I think, okay, you'd read like, oh, this is different from the anime or, that kind of thing. And so it just kind of slowly became, watching more of it because of that. And then when I started my channel, it was originally just a way to like, talk about things I liked. I just began focused on anime because some of the things I thought were really interesting, no one was talking about, became that. So yeah, there's no real, no real history. It just slowly developed, and then, the more there was a period where I was like, I sat and thought, it's like kind of similar to what you were saying, like I knew Western principles, but I'd just be like, okay, but is this how it was actually made? Because I'd always, ascribed, oh, of course this movie had a 3-act structure. All movies have 3-act structures, kind of thinking to it. And then it's not an exciting story at all.
No, that's awesome.
It's pretty cool. And also part
relatable.
of my sorry, you said Cha, you were saying.
I just said it's pretty relatable. So, but continue.
Yeah, no, part of my curiosity with that is, you live in Japan, you speak some Japanese. So I'm just kind of admittedly just curious about that part. But if that's too personal, you don't have to answer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I don't want to be, again, we've talked after all that long conversation we had about the industry. No way in hell am I going to work at it.
I'm kind of glad to hear that after say that, because because we hear about so many people who are like, they want to go to Japan and be an animator, but then it's also like, I'm maybe a bit selfishly glad to hear when people don't do it and kind of focus on their own well-being, even though I'm sure there will be like fulfilling elements, but I'm glad no one is going to the hospital from overwork. So
yeah. Again, like I said, I have animated before, and I did it in the capacity of work, but it was when those projects came in, and whenever I did them, it'd just be like a kind of, because I knew, okay, this is going to be an all-nighter, or this is going to be a tough project. My boss didn't really understand how animation worked. So is that, and it's like, it's not that I don't want to animate, it's just that I don't want to die of working.
I just don't want to die. It's understandable.
Yeah.
In Japanese, it's called karoshi, like a death from overwork. So I don't want to, when there's a word for it, it's
they have a specific word for it. That's when you're like, maybe we have an issue going on.
Yeah.
Which I saw addressed in one of this season's new anime, the slime. I killed 300 slimes. The whole opening was about the main character dying from overwork, and I was like, oh god.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see that. Yeah.
And actually, funny weeb confession here, or embarrassing weeb confession, however it comes out. I actually seriously did want to pursue animation as an animator when I was a lot younger. I wanted to be an animator in Japan, and I once there was like a Japanese like artist illustrator that we once invited to like our college, and she was kind of giving us like a tutorial on manga drawing and all that stuff. And I told her like what my dream was. And then she's like, "That's not realistic. don't even bother. Like, you don't even want to." And I didn't get why she was saying that at the time. But years later, when I decided not to pursue it, and I see all the problems with the animation industry and all of that, I'm just like, you know what? Maybe I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think if in my wildest dreams, if there was ever a chance to it, it would be like in a guest capacity, because like sometimes they'll get like someone does a guest ED or something like that, or I think the Swedish job would be a composer wouldn't be too bad, and there are a lot of cases like that, like the guy who did Made in Abyss, Kevin Penkin, I think. Yeah, Kevin, the man from Perth. And like that'd be pretty, like something like that, like in a more removed guest capacity.
Yeah.
Maybe in my wildest dreams for that, but like as a career, fuck no.
I'm so glad to hear that in a weird way. Yeah. Like you should be encouraging of that, but it's like, no, stay alive.
I don't want to develop pancreatic cancer.
And sometimes a lot of people don't appreciate or value as much their health as they should, both mental and physical, because they get into this mindset of, you got to give everything for your dreams. You got to burn bright, nothing else matters.
Which is terrible. And I think that's that's a contributing factor to why the wages are low. So the wages are low in anime, of course, definitely. But you see this a lot across a lot of creative industries. You see this like, in Western film industries and, stuff like that. I have far more experience with working on film sets and that kind of thing. And there's this expectation. It's like, oh, no, you have to work hard because this is your passion, right? You love this, right? And it's like, yeah, but I'm still tired,
Yeah.
They use that to manipulate you to get more out of you. And that's where it's harmful.
Yeah, and I think that kind of same there's that not just that, there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think there's also an element with that, which is like, you want to be a mangaka, right? You want to be an animator, right? So this is what you gotta do. You gotta grind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is an interesting point. It's probably like important to highlight for people who are younger and don't realize it, like especially if they're, as you guys like both kind of had similar dreams of like, oh, I'd like to do this, but then you learn the truth of it and you're like, nope, self-preservation kicks in. But
Yeah.
I think it's like important for like people to realize how like a lot of times corporations can, manipulate your passion for something. So it sounds like it's much better to kind of like much healthier, so to speak, to engage in that in a capacity that, makes you still feel fulfilled, but then also lets you put your health first and not die.
And not just corporations, even on a micro scale, people that try to pay artists based on exposure, like, hey, you want to get big, this is your passion, right? So
that's still kind of wild. Yeah. I mean, I can't do I can't draw anything, so I haven't been in that position, but like, it's still wild to me when I hear stuff of like, oh yeah, like, draw this for me and I'll plug you or something on social media. It's like, that is not money. Sorry. I know it's like, advertisement, but that is not money.
It's not money. No.
Yeah. So I guess this is like this, I guess I feel like it turns into, I'm not sure how old you are. We're almost, I'll call us boomers. We're getting up in our,
this is the Anime Boomer podcast.
The boomers. So Welcome. It's like, kids, don't follow your dreams if they kill you.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say it's late 20s. So.
Oh, that's okay. So that's where we are.
That's
I don't want to.
Okay.
That's where we're at. So that's like we're on the same.
It seems like in the anime community, that's the boomer. So
yeah. My friend Lisa Wallen came up with Weeaboomer. When she turned 30, she's like, I'm the Weeaboomer now, and it's like.
You either quit anime while you're young, or you stay an anime fan long enough to see yourself become the boomer of the community.
It's cool to hear all this too. I mean, I think I really like the way that I guess going back to your video, but it just applies to this too. Like I really appreciate your like flexibility and like how to talk about things, because you're like, people are discussing anime wrong, and it's because like they feel like there are certain like strict guidelines they need to follow. And I've always been a fan of like what you said, I think almost verbatim, like in the video, is like, you have to look at what they're trying to accomplish and how they execute that. And I feel like that's such an important message for people to hear for just like everything in like an artistic field. Like, it's called, we're watching something that doesn't really have rules. Like if we wanted to follow rules, we would be talking about math, which it's like very set. So it's like important to remind people that like the artistic aspect means like creativity is endless.
Yeah.
It's completely blanked. Oh, that reminded me of something.
Sorry, my Shonen MC speech, like talk no jutsu at you.
I was uplifted,
Thank
so.
You. The person can't draw, like do the thing.
And, you get your second wind, the aura starts.
Cue the music.
Well, I think that's no, I've completely blanked on what I was going to say. Never mind.
I'm sorry.
I was hoping that if I started talking, it would come back to me, but it didn't. So,
that's what I do every time.
Well, in terms of, Shaw mentioned something of achieving goals with content and bringing it back to Jaden. I'm fairly new to your channel, and I've seen I think I've watched more of the recent videos, but I see that there's what was that?
I said that's better. You don't have to watch the old ones. That's okay.
I liked the one I saw. The one I saw was great. Reviewing. That's not that old.
Oh,
but
that one's okay. That one's okay.
That's like such a cool concept, though. Everyone should check that out. It's quick, but it's accessible too. Or just check out all the videos. But that one's so accessible. It's like it's so cool. I love favorite.
Just watch
videos.
his whole body of work. Just do it.
Sit down and do it.
You really don't have to. Yeah.
But I saw that there's kind of like more of a recent shift now to, you were having more personal videos, kind of just what you're into, what you're interested, more you're now anime as a hobby, to now kind of talking about animation and kind of sort of educating on the medium for at least for the past 3 or 4 videos. Starting with people don't know how to talk about animation, that video. Do you have a specific goal in mind? Are you looking to, has something shifted? Are you trying to achieve something different with your content?
Not deliberately. It kind of just happens. Kind of always with my stuff, I've only made it if I felt like I had something to say. I'd always get uncomfortable if people would be like, can you review this, or can you talk about this? And it was like, I could, but I'm going to say what everyone else says, you know. And in a conversation, that's fine, but just making a YouTube video about it, I don't want to waste anybody's time, you know. Like the type of video I hate is when it's like 10 facts you didn't know about this, and then you go, okay, and you click on it, and it's like, I knew this. I went on the wiki too, you know. Yeah. So there was that. I guess it's because I don't know. I don't want to make a big claim like I'm trying to educate. I mean, is what I'm doing, but I really want to stress, I don't want to claim I'm not an authority on this, you know. It's just that I don't see it being talked about, and so I think it should be talked about.
Maybe like bring awareness instead of educate.
Yeah.
Or like open a dialogue. We're going to start a dialogue.
That's a good way to say it. Open a dialogue, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not very like, this is how you do things. It's like, hey guys, this is not productive. Let's have a talk about this. And then the result is like, you can do what you want, just kind of like be aware of like what actually goes into this.
And often with some of my most recent videos too, it's been like, I thought of that question. Like I did a video on lip sync, and I thought of that question. And I was like, okay, it can't just be budget. It can't just be that, you know? So I looked into it, you know? Or it would be, I found out a piece of information, like, you know, I'd researched something, and it'd be like, oh, why have I never heard of this before? This seems so fundamental, you know? Yeah. And so
that's awesome.
That's just kind of been the thought process recently, you know, when inspiration strikes. So.
Would you, do you see yourself shifting back to, you know, kind of the content you were doing before? Are you kind of see yourself, you're going to just keep going in this direction for the foreseeable future? Is it sort of on a whim, you know, whatever you're feeling, hey, I want to review this, I'm going to go back to that?
I think I'll keep as long as the, you know, the inspiration strikes. But yeah, it really is on a whim. Like something I have done recently is just like, I used to care a lot about like being on brand, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And I decided, fuck it, I can, you know. I can, you know.
Yeah.
Is that why you started, you know, drinking in the videos, or has that always been there?
That's just because I'm an alcoholic. No.
Bringing behind the scenes to life.
Yeah. Well, that was the first one, was because the first time I did that was because the first time I did that, I thought it'd be funny because it was like opening a can of worms, right? But also it's because I wasn't used to recording myself on camera. And so when I record my voice, I tend to stutter a lot and have to do a lot of retakes. But I guess, I don't know, it seemed to work. It just seemed to loosen me up a little bit. And
you know, funnily enough, I noticed that in your people don't know how to talk about animation video, because every time you would go into a big can of worms, you'd take a sip. And I was like, I was rewatching it. And I'm like, oh, this is loosening him up.
Yeah. So that was definitely not planned, but yeah.
I do have to say, and I'm not saying this to be polite, so if you do continue with these videos, you do have a knack for it, like explaining it, like, right, you know.
That's very kind,
yeah.
Even if you don't consider yourself an authority, to be able to research it, it's one thing to like know the information, it's another thing to present it. And I think you do a really good job of the careful balance of, you know, how much is too much, you know, what to say, following it up with examples, but also giving all the context for it, you know, the necessary context.
That's like the hardest line to straddle, of like being, like sharing information, but not doing it in a somewhat condescending way. I think that's like the hardest line to straddle. And I think you do like a perfect job of like communicating the information without, you know, anyone kind of feeling like, oh, he's here to he's here to talk down to me. Like you don't get that vibe at all, which is very impressive and very tough to do.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because that is a big concern that I have. Because but it's tough, right? Because, and I'm sure maybe you have had similar things, but there are some things where it's like, okay, this will be condescending if I say this, but if I don't say this, I might be elitist because some people might genuinely not know. Yeah. So for example, I'm planning to do a video about Yotsuba, right? I just want to bring out Yotsuba.
Nice. I heard good things.
I'm planning to do a video. Yeah, I want to plan to do a video about Yotsuba, specifically about Yotsuba in Japanese, right? But there's a part, I've written up a script, but there's a part of Yotsuba where I don't know whether I should explain hiragana, katakana, and kanji, because to people who even know a little bit about Japanese, to be like, yeah, I know what kanji is, you know, like why are you talking about this? But to people who don't, it's really fundamental knowledge, and so it's always that, like, debate of like, okay, is this vital for someone who hasn't seen it? And if I don't say this, is it another way of condescending of like, oh, you don't know about kanji? Are you even an anime fan? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it definitely is a hard balance to strike.
Yeah, because the other balance besides the condescending versus, balancing that is balancing over information. I think in the videos that I saw, you gave enough that I wasn't bored. I was engaged. I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. And then we moved on to the next thing. And I was like, okay, because it's hard to give all the information without it being an information dump and losing, that engagement or someone staying tuned in.
Yeah. Well, I was just trying to keep in mind, if I stumbled across this video, would I watch the whole thing? That's what I try and keep in mind, because there are very few videos that are longer than 10 minutes that I'm watching the full thing.
Yeah. So. I might not be the best case, but I mean, I might take it with a grain of salt, but I always know, like, you kind of spoke about it before where like you watch a video, like 10 facts you didn't know. And then it's like, this is the name of the guy who did the opening. Like, cool, I could look that up. But so I think when I'm watching a video, if I'm interested in it, if I hear, and I am always looking for like new information, I kind of want there to be like a reason as to why there's like an explanation for something. And I think with something like Yotsuba, which I haven't read, but I heard it's like, it's kind of like the feel good, comfy, like slice of life series. And those can be so hard to like articulate with so many like cultural differences. So I think you explaining something like specific kanji that has a connotation is something that like I would not know otherwise unless you said it. So I think in a video like that, it's kind of perfect to have that. So, I mean, you don't have to keep it in, but I would just say I always appreciate new information that I can't find from a 2-second Google search. And I think that's really valuable, especially because it's just so hard to articulate the appeal of slice of life, Yashike, like comfy shows. And it's such a cultural difference. So I feel don't listen. You don't have to listen to me, but I encourage keeping it because I enjoy that thing.
Yeah. It's always a balance. Yeah.
And also coming from someone that is very familiar with hiragana and katakana, I wouldn't mind you bringing it up just because it could serve as one, a refresher, and two, it's like, it's not something I actively talk about with other anime fans. So being able to hear a different spin or maybe kind of, something else that you're adding to the dialogue is also valuable. So
yeah. Okay. I'll consider it.
And I will watch that video whenever it comes out.
Yes.
Whenever that is, yeah.
No pressure. Just, distant future, if then. So, no pressure.
I do have to say, though, I was going to say this earlier because we were just talking about Yashike and comfy shows. That is what I love about Girls Last Tour, that contrast between the apocalypse. How can a show be so comfy when it's in the freaking apocalypse? And I love that it strikes that balance.
Yeah. That's definitely. And Girls Last Tour, that's a good example. Togoshimatsu is because like people compared it to I really hate the cute girls doing nothing, meme. One, it's condescending, but two, it's like it's that's definitely like there are separate terms for slice of life, especially in Japanese media, And Shoujo definitely falls on the Yashike side because it's more about healing. It's more about comfy and good feelings, whereas something like Azumagadayo is more nichijoke. It's about just the everyday life, right? So yeah. Thank you for using those terms.
I actually until this episode I forgot Iyashike, the term for like ever, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what it is, because my friend loves slice of life and he loves the healing shows and stuff like that. So and he would bring that up to me, but I have not talked about it in a long time. So I was like, oh, okay, that's what it was. I think that's about it. That's like all we had. Unless you guys have something else you wanted to bring up. That's about all we have for this episode. We're glad you could be on with us to talk about it. If you have not checked out Jaden's channel, if you've not checked out the videos in question that we've talked about, you can find him or subscribe to him at youtube.com/TheCynicClinic.
Yeah. Go sub. Go do it.
Yeah.
Go move masses. Go do it.
You got to do it. Or you can follow him on Twitter at CynicClinic_YT. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, TheCynicClinic was actually already taken. And
Listen,
it's that, and it's a reference to chills. So double. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I definitely know. I have the experience of something being taken. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Lord Onimaru. Anyways, thanks for joining us, guys. Help support the channel by subscribing so we can keep it growing. And if you're already subscribed, give us a like or a comment. Let us hear what you thought. You can also check out the audio version of the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It'll usually be up a day after the live stream, maybe 2 days the latest. And besides that, if you want to learn to talk better about animation, you want to elevate your discourse, we gave some good recommendations on this episode. Or if, you don't give a shit, that's up to you. But this is just what we think. And, what do we know? We're just weebs.
Nice segue.
Thanks.
And that's it.
Trying to get to the just weebs part. Like, don't give a shit. We're just weebs.
Yeah. I was just like, shit, how do I do this? I went too long.
Whenever I end up having to do the outro, it's really going to be like, we really don't care. We're just weebs. It's just going to go straight to the segue.
I think, next episode, you could do the outro. We're going to have to switch off.
Gonna see the true depths of despair of doing an intro and outro. Yeah. That was fun though. Thanks for joining. That's like such a fun topic.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I feel like animation's always something people like. I think deep down they want to know what to say, but it's like the effort to get there is so tough. But then it's rewarding, but then it's frustrating because you see people who don't know, and then you're like, I've crossed this bridge and I want you to cross it too, but you're not there yet.
Yeah, and then for viewers in the chat that are wondering, we're just doing the post show, so the main recording part of the stream is done. Now we're just chilling. If you want to ask questions.
Okay, I was wondering about that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And if you have to go, because it's late by you, we don't have to keep you. So this is just
it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah. This could be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you are willing to stay on. I know it's late for you. He was looking forward to peace out, and now it's like, what the fuck, guys?
It's like I thought we were free.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think they do deep down want to know. There is an element too. I think people they don't want to admit that they don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I get. You don't want to seem like you're stupid or anything like that. But I feel like there's no real shame in it.
Yeah, because no one's like, there's no like animation class we had where we're like, no one was paying attention because they didn't have it. It's just like something you have to go out of your way to learn about, and and I think it is easy to get caught up in. Maybe we can call it Sakuga culture of like, oh, this one clip was trending on Twitter, so this must be really good. And then you have the cases of like Ufotable where they're like, a lot of times it's not the animation per se, but it's like the digital effects, but it still looks good. So you're like, okay, like the animation itself might not be like super complicated, but like everything that comes together looks nice. So it gets really complicated, I think, and people might not want to go down that path to think about all the elements that go into play, but then you're like, well, now I know, so I can't go back.
Yeah. And I think you don't necessarily, like Jaden was saying a lot during the episode, you don't necessarily have to learn these things, but I think where it becomes a noticeable problem is when like this misinformation gets spread and it leads to kind of like toxic takes or misunderstandings and kind of, I don't know, like people talking bad about the industry.
Yeah, I feel like if you're in a position, it's a particularly bad problem because if you're in a position where it can, you're claiming you're telling it like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you're shooting the shit with someone, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's less of an issue than if someone with a wide audience does it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It comes down to dunking culture too,
Dunking culture comes down.
Dunking is fun, right? Dunking is fun. Sure, I love watching a shitty movie and ripping on it, but it's like, it's just the claiming the person who made it was lazy when it's like there's probably a reason why it looks shit.
I did see you did a video on The Room, so
I just thought of that.
Yeah, technically it's on. The main topic is Ultraviolet. I put The Room in there for SEO because I do talk about The Room, but it's mainly about Ultraviolet because that's a movie. Yeah, I rewatched it, and it's a piece of shit. It's so bad, right? But it's not because the people who made it were incompetent. It's just like kind of comedy of errors, like a whole bunch of scheduling thing, a whole bunch of like studio interference, edits, cuts. One of the worst things about it is some of the effects. That there's that infamous motorcycle chase. They just had no time, and they had to use the previs material. Just like the demo stuff they do to like kind of get the shot, and that's why it looks like shit.
I still have yet to see The Room. I gotta see it. I hear so many things.
Pretty good.
My friend made me watch it. He loves that movie. I did not want to watch it. He made all of us watch it, and we were just like, I don't want to see this. It was the longest hour and 30 minutes of my life.
Okay, I can do that. I can handle an hour and 30 minutes.
He likes like that's his humor. He likes stuff that's kind of absurd or just nonsensical. It makes him laugh. For me, it's just painful. But now I get it. I appreciate it. He made me watch The Disaster Artist afterward. I think I really like The Disaster Artist. So
yeah, my history of The Rooms. I remember when I first saw it. I think I saw it. Yeah, like I heard about it, that it was like the worst movie ever made, and I watched it. And after about half an hour, I turned off. I'm like, it's boring. I can't do this. And I think I went to show it to my sister, because I was telling my sister about how like I got recommended this terrible movie. It's like and I put it on, and suddenly seeing her being like, "What the fuck," was hilarious. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and now I just like quote it all the time. I think it's absolutely hilarious. So
it's like when you like ironically watch it, and then you start unironically incorporating it into your life.
Kind of
the
well,
trap.
And also because one of the things about The Room, and I talk about it in the video, is that The Room was, apart from Tommy Wiseau, the people who made The Room were normal people. They knew what they should be doing, but they couldn't because their paycheck was, it's crazy, dude.
Well, what made me appreciate it more was definitely watching The Disaster Artist. And if you don't know Shaw, that was like kind of how The Room was made. And so like,
was that like James Franco played him?
James Franco and his brother Dave Franco. Like James Franco played Tommy Wiseau and Dave Franco played his best friend that was along for the ride.
That's so funny.
And now me and my friend are always just quoting it, and it's just we just find it like there's like a scene in the movie where like Dave Franco, well, the guy gets into James Franco's car, who's playing Tommy Wiseau, and he's like, "Don't talk about me. Just don't," like, because he was like talking about, like, he mentioned something about him like to someone else. He's like, "Don't talk about me ever."
I need to see this just for The Disaster
And
Artist.
now me and my friend, we're always looking at each other and like, "Don't talk about me."
I love that. Because like,
have you read the book?
No, I did not. No.
The book even has even more scenes like that. There's one part where because they live in San Francisco. There's one part where Greg came out, and one of Tommy's cars, because Tommy is rich and loaded and has one of Tommy's cars was completely covered in dust on the back windshield, and you look, and Tommy had drawn the Zodiac symbol on the back of the car. And then Greg had this moment of just being like, is Tommy the Zodiac killer? And I think it's just Tommy saw the symbol and didn't know what it was, and just drew it because he thought it looked cool. But it was this thing that Greg was putting it, and it's like, Tommy could be the Zodiac killer.
I love this.
The appeal for the uninitiated, the appeal of The Room and The Disaster Artist and all that is really Tommy Wiseau. He's such a character, like he's such an enigma, and you don't know what he's thinking, and like, and it's just. You're just
I think I'll find it funny based on this. I just find like the dumbest shit funny. So I think this is gonna be funny. And it might be cringe, but I think I've seen worse. But I mean worse cringe. We'll find out.
It'll definitely be cringe.
I love it. This sounds great.
That's great.
Yeah. I can see it because we live through like Jersey Shore. I think we can handle it.
I want to say one thing. Tri pointed out a great.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Yeah. Great show of limited animation is Anituber Kusuri wa Nai, or the English title is translated to the English title is Please Take My Brother Away. Literally it translates to There's No Medicine for My Brother. But I guess that doesn't sound as catchy. So that show, it's based off a manhwa, or like a Chinese manga.
Yeah.
And it's like a co-production between China and Japan, and it's really good. Like the use of limited animation is really good. So,
nice.
It's
That's
very
cool.
short. Yeah. It's only about there's 4 seasons. Each episode's only 3 minutes though. So
cool.
You can bang it out. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't get to mention, touch on too much in the the actual main part of the recording or the podcast was that I think maybe what you appreciate about limited animation or stuff like that is because it's like it's more experimental, and that stuff, like those risks are what push the medium forward, as opposed to the Sakuga are kind of like the more formulaic kind of things that have already been done before. Yes, they look nicely animated, but they're not doing anything different. Maybe we did touch on that. I don't know.
With the bid, yeah. I mean, anime owes its existence to limited animation, with Tezuka and Adam, and
I didn't get to say it, but Kino's Journey is very Kino, and I'm glad that's your favorite, and everyone should watch it.
I have not watched Kino's Journey still. I've heard always great things. It's
really great. It's like you said, it's really tough to say, like, explain the appeal, but once you watch it, you're like, okay, I get it. This is it.
Actually, part of the reason I haven't watched it, and I'm not closed-minded towards it, it's just, in general, episodic, self-contained shows are not my thing by default. I find that I like things kind of, I like continuity and kind of just that kind of being like gripped by something and wanting to see what happens next. So shows like that, I'm like, I don't naturally gravitate towards.
Fair enough, yeah. Though there is some cool stuff, without spoiling, there is some cool stuff with continuity, because most of the episodes are not necessarily in chronological order. So there are some things in earlier episodes where it's one of those things when you rewatch it and you're like, oh, that's the thing she got from that episode later.
Oh, okay. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
so there's some stuff like that. Yeah.
It's
usually very episodic.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of the, like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know a good way of saying this. Like, some shows you're like kind of frustrated when they're episodic. This one is like, it could not exist if it was not episodic. So I feel like it's like when you watch it, it's like not frustrating because you're like, this is the only way it could be.
I mean, like, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 made it onto my top, my 3x3, so I can't, give episodic stuff too much flack.
I'm actually, start drumming here. I'm a big fan of episodic content, and I actually lament the death of the episode in American television.
It's really sad. It's really sad because I was thinking back to it because I just recently rewatched Cowboy Bebop, and it's just so, you're so aware of how it's like a product of its time where you could like turn on the TV, it's a network program where it's like any episode could be on and you can enjoy it because it's just like any episode. And now it's like with, streaming services and binging, I love binging. It's, I'll binge anything in like a day. And I do think it helps me appreciate things more, but it does make me sad because there are so many of my, childhood favorites that I enjoyed because you could just pick up any of them and watch them like on any given day, any episode.
Yeah. So, let's say I like continuity, but I really don't like this trend of like throwing all the episodes at once on Netflix. And then each episode is only an episode because that's how the format works. And it's like the story just ends and then you load up the next episode. There's not like a satisfying conclusion for it's not even like, when you think of like a book, right?
Yeah.
A good chapter, even though you can continue reading the book and smash out the book in one night, a good chapter will end on a satisfying point that, I've got to go to sleep, That's a good point. And so I lament that seems to be going away with TV episodes because episodes just end and start,
Yeah, but no, I definitely agree on that. I'm just thinking there have been some serialized shows that have like had one like standout, totally self-contained episode, and it was just really good. I think it was like Breaking Bad did that. Did Breaking Bad have like an episode like that?
They had a few like that. They had The Fly.
Oh yeah, The Fly, the notorious Fly.
That was a mixed one. I love The Fly, but
Yeah. I feel like, The Fly is definitely an interesting one per se. I think Breaking Bad is a good example of a series that is like, very continuous, but like each episode just kind of feel like they had the idea of like, we're starting with like a starting theme and we're ending on that, like they bring everything full circle in each episode. And I think like a lot of other series might not do that as much, but I do notice when like episodes feel almost self-contained in and of themselves. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you think like, like when people describe like an older TV show, like there'd be somebody, they'd say like, oh, do you remember like, for example, talking about Ava? Ava's a very continuous show, right?
Yeah.
But people will say like, oh, the episode where this angel comes and he fucks it up, Like they'll describe it like that, the episode where. But like I feel like a lot of modern stuff that you don't say the episode where, they just say, the part because they
like when that happens.
It's in,
Yeah, that's such a good point too. Yeah,
I just really appreciate you just keep bringing up Evangelion. So thank you.
I mean, that's the shirt, so
Love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and I don't have anything. I think now that I'm actually thinking about it, because when you guys mentioned Western kind of episodic like shows, like I thought of like I watched a lot of sitcoms growing up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I love those. So I think maybe I have a different expectation when it comes to Western shows versus what I go to anime for when it comes for that.
Yeah.
Like I did like being able to just put on an episode of something and just at any time and just picking up or even like this is actually way later when I was much older. Like I would have the TV on and Law and Order would come on and I didn't mean to watch the episode. I didn't want to watch the episode, but then I lingered for like 2 minutes and I'm like, oh, just watching the whole thing.
Yeah. Law and Order gets you. Law and Order gets you where you could be like 30 minutes into the episode, not know what's going on. And you're like, yeah, I know this is it. We know it. We're hooked. We know what's going to happen. We're going to trial.
Yeah.
What I really don't like is if it's an adaptation of a manga, they won't just do, they'll like end it midway through what I know was a manga chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because it'll just be like, oh, come on, man. The manga chapter ended on a much more satisfying cliffhanger. What are you doing at this point?
Yeah.
And then you notice they kind of either had to do that for, whatever, production reasons, like they don't have enough material they needed to fill out. So it's not that they don't want to, but they need to keep it, Like I realized that a lot when I watched World Trigger season 1 and how, they really like, because I was observing, what they used to like really stretch out the thing to 73 episodes. Like they would make flashbacks a lot longer. They would include more flashbacks and they would linger on a lot more scenes. And it's like, okay, this is just to, make it fill up more episodes. So.
Yeah, I saw you did a video about World Trigger because I remember, and I was one of those. I remember seeing the first episode and back in the day, and I did kind of just drop it because like some of the animation. Again, that's a good example, right? Where I probably didn't give it its fair dues because it was a little bit slow, and there were some moments where I thought,
yeah.
But like I feel like now, if I gave it another chance, I might be more. It's still tough because 73 episodes is.
I do address all of that in the video. I actually made it a point to address everything negative because I'm actually one of the people, and I said in the video that I didn't even give it a chance. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch the first episode. I just looked at the description, didn't read it, was like, nah, I'm not watching this. And then I don't know. And now I revisited it with a different mindset, and I was like, oh, okay, And I was able to kind of like overlook all the negative things because the source material felt that strong.
I think second chances are good.
Also, it's second season, even though it came like 5 or 6 years later. Years later, it remedies all of those issues.
Okay,
production issues. Yeah.
No, I think second chances are good. And you can't force them; it has to be voluntary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Funnily enough, one for me that might surprise you is Trigun. I didn't like Trigun when I first tried to watch it.
No, that definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
Do you like it now?
I like it now. Yeah.
So I'm in the same boat. When I was a lot younger, pretty much like when I was first still like new to anime, a lot of people hyped up Trigun. Like it was just this magnum opus, whatever.
Because people would say it's like the rival of Cowboy Bebop. That's
that's
claim,
like,
right?
I never got
very ludicrous.
Yeah.
So because when I watched Trigun, I was like, I don't know, I don't get this. Like I don't see, I could maybe see that for Cowboy Bebop more than I could see that for Trigun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I didn't really like it until the backstory episode. I have this weird, like, I don't think this is healthy, but this is where I'm like, I'll watch a show and I kind of like wait for a moment or a couple moments to really like hook me in a way. And I'll still watch it, but it's like, I have almost like a clear like memory of like when a show hooks me. And I think Trigun, I started really warming up to like with the backstory episode. So I was kind of lukewarm on it until then. So I like it too now, but like, no, please, Cowboy Bebop kind of clear.
Yeah.
Well, it's such an interesting comparison. It's like the only thing you could realistically say to compare them is that the composer was the guitarist for the Seatbelts.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. That's like literally the only link it has. Everything
Yeah.
else is completely different directors, different
Yeah.
lineages, completely different manga, completely different genres. You know, it's just
Yeah.
because maybe at the time there was just a limited pool of compared to now, a more limited pool of choices. So
I think it's also probably like the sci-fi cowboy setup. I think the general premise is probably what people think like, oh, like I like Cowboy Bebop. It's like sci-fi, but it's also cowboy. Like what's kind of similar? And they think of Trigun, even though, you know, thematically and conceptually they're very different, but like on a surface level, they could kind of seem similar and like similar-ish aesthetics, but like not really. So you know. It doesn't really do either of them service by like you're not really helping either by saying like they're kind of similar because unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. And I actually can say that I still haven't given it a second chance, so I actually have to probably watch it again from beginning to end to really, because again, I was a lot younger. Maybe I would get more details.
Yeah, when I rewatched it, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Like when it's separate from all that, and I had some other things too. Like I thought tonally it was a bit weird, but it became a lot better. I remember when I first tried to watch it, everyone also told me to watch the dub, and I wasn't feeling it. I watched it in Japanese, and surprise, it's a little more digestible. So yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Yeah.
Speaking of examples of shows that everyone's kind of hyped about, but I was kind of lukewarm on, still kind of lukewarm on for the longest time, is Jujutsu Kaisen.
I just finished that. Why did you say that? I just finished that and I like it now. Why are you doing that?
Sorry.
No, I hate that.
Maybe I knew.
Change your opinion. I don't like it.
I was pretty I wasn't seeing what people were seeing with it until and I won't go into it too much in case Jaden hasn't watched it, so he won't know what we're talking about. But until the Toto episode where he does the whole best friend spiel
that was so
and the
funny.
flashback, I was dying, and I was like, just for this man, I love this show now.
Oh yeah, that was a turning point, I think.
Yeah,
I know. So kind of because Jaden said that his 10th is Bleach, either because he actually likes it or pure pressure from a friend. Close enough. My friend said that Jujutsu Kaisen is kind of like the closest of the new stuff to modern day Bleach. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm quoting my friend. Don't come for me.
There's clear influence from Bleach.
Yeah.
For the reference, I like Bleach. I don't know if it's good.
But I think that's fair. So now I will officially I like Jujutsu Kaisen. It's probably my favorite of the newer Battle Shonen era, like, the My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, definitely over Black Clover. So like,
you know what? You and I need to talk about this. I want you to catch up to the manga for My Hero Academia, and then we'll talk.
Okay, yeah, but Jujutsu Kaisen got me, so I'm officially a drip over writing person now. I care about drip now. I don't care about writing. I'm joining the team.
So that's what it is.
Raw swag goat over complex writing. Not that Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't have any of that. Not underplaying it, but it's always the meme of like drip over writing. So now I'm team drip.
No, I have to know now because I'm curious, because Shaw is, I don't know if you know this, Jaden, but she's very strict about scores. So, you could tell like what she truly feels, like honestly about a show by her score. So what is Jujutsu Kaisen for you? She's checking.
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Oh, I thought you were asking. I was like,
no, I'm talking about you. You're very strict about scores.
I gave it an 8. I gave it an 8.
Gotcha.
I did it. Gave it an 8. I think that's kind of, the way I feel about it is I don't think it's the like greatest thing of all time right now based on season 1. I don't think it's reached those peaks, but I think it has the potential later down the line. What
moment made it an 8 for you? Because you were talking about moments that really click. So what? I just want to know.
The Toto one is one. I was like, most of the humor for this show has been like kind of dumb thus far, but just this dude hearing about some other guy's type and girls having a fabricated flashback of them being childhood friends and him cheering him on and then coming away crying and telling him we're besties now. Like the big hulky dude being like, we're best friends now. It's just so funny.
Well, and that moment single-handedly made it like a 10 for me.
Yeah, that one is just like so funny. But then I think it was continuing afterwards. Let's see because they had the big fight that was kind of cool. Like I like the fights, but I think it was just, I'm trying to think it through. And then they had the baseball episode. They had a baseball episode. It's like, so it's kind of, that was fun too. But I do think it was closer to the end. I realized, because up until that point, like most simps, I liked Gojo a lot because I like his design and his voice actor is my favorite, whatever. So I liked him a lot, but I was like, okay, I need to connect with other characters. Then Todo came in. I love that. But I couldn't like fully get behind the cast until the last 2 or 3 episodes when they're facing that like bridge, whatever. And then I was like fully behind Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara, like the main cast. And I was like, I buy into your dynamics. You guys are like normal teenagers. I'm down to see what you guys get in, what antics you guys get into. I'm invested in you guys. Let's go. So I think that was the moment where I was like, I can get behind the show. I
can understand that. Yeah. I think that moment definitely helped out because it was kind of light on sort of making it hard to invest in them from the beginning. And it wasn't until more towards the end where they gave you more to latch onto. But, you know, back to the chat, Drax mentioned, I got no idea what the drip meme is about.
Do I have to explain? Okay, this is really stupid. But so I think there's like a genuine conversation to be had about this. But in the meantime, there's the whole idea of like when you're talking about like action series and stuff, when you're like, okay, there's the good writing, the complex writing, all of that. But then at some point, you just kind of want to see really badass, cool looking shit. And that's kind of like, you know, that's where it comes into play where people are like, they'll talk about these 2 characters and it's like, okay, this one, complex backstory. But this other guy looks really cool and he fucks shit up. So I'm going with that one because he's more enjoyable. So it's kind of the like entertainment value versus thought-provoking writing. And like, they're not mutually exclusive, but it is that idea of like, turn your brain off for hype. And I think that it kind of gets conflated into a lot of shit posting and memes. But the idea of just being like, okay, I'm here for the fun action, the fun hype. I don't really care if they're not, you know, the most complicated written characters. But I mean, I do think there's some value. I don't think Jujutsu Kaisen is like guilty of that. I do think there's good writing involved. Otherwise, I wouldn't be as invested. But it is a bit, but that's kind of the like, that's the meme behind it is like drip over writing. So.
What do you think about that, Jaden? What are your thoughts on drip over writing or turn your brain off?
Oh, well, like you said, it's not mutually exclusive. So if you can have drip and writing, it's the best. But no, I mean, it gets to that point. That's kind of where I get to with Bleach, actually, because like I love the first 2 arcs of Bleach, and even when you get into there's even stuff in the later arcs that are interesting. But there reaches a point where it's just like it gets so convoluted. There's so many characters. The lore has been screwed with so much. You're like, I just want to see some like cool dragon sword that like eats people, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of like when you get to it's the Godzilla versus King Kong of like essence, where you're like, you know, people were like reviewing it and they're like, you know, the writing is not that good, and some people are mocking them. They're like, I want to see the big monkey punch the giant lizard.
Like the arrogance of man to think the writing needs to be good. Let them fight. God.
Yeah. Well, it's like, what does writing mean in that instance? You know, because it's like
it's a spectacle.
If what you're being sold is the spectacle, then the
writing
needed
to see we needed to see Godzilla feeling emotion, like a nuanced like character study on Godzilla.
Like we don't need that. Monkey goes punch. So
all right, just to be mindful of Jaden, and it's really late for him. I think.
I'm starting to tap out. So.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for sticking with us on drip versus the hard-hitting questions of drip versus writing.
That's okay. It's a drip versus writing. Yeah. Check out Gil Lies Here, my good friend. He has a tweet called "Drip a Shaggy Rogers Story," and
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it's from Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed, because Shaggy in that movie had some fine fits.
Ooh, okay. Now that's something. Yeah. Now that's some like interesting source, some interesting food for thought.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Jaden, once again, thanks for joining us. Everyone else, thanks for sticking with us for the post show, and we'll see you next week. Follow our Twitter for any updates, and we'll let you know what's in store for next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys. This is such a bad heart.